Good evening, everyone. I would like to call to order the Hingham School Committee meeting of October 1st, 2018. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. We're having a few technical difficulties, perhaps, with the overhead, so we may at times have to refer to paper copies, so apologies to folks on TV who might be watching. If we can't get this working, I guess we could put them up on the website for people to look at after the meeting. So again, good evening, everyone. The first order of business tonight is item number 2, approval of minutes. Item 2.1, we have minutes of the school committee meeting held on July 23rd, 2018. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the school committee meeting held on July 23rd, 2018.
Do I have a second? Libby? Thank you, Libby. Any discussion, comments, questions, edits?
I'll abstain from voting, just because I didn't do anything.
Kennedy? Okay.
I thought the edits reflected what we had talked about at the last meeting, so.
Okay. All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, thank you, everyone.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the school committee meeting held on August 20th, 2018.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Carlos. Any discussion? Everyone's good? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Item number 3 on our agenda are audience comments. Always welcome as agenda items are discussed, but we have set aside this time at the beginning of the meeting for any comments for items not on the agenda. Is anyone here tonight looking to make comments? No? All right, thank you. Then we will move on to item number 4, the superintendent's report. So Dr. Gallo, your report.
We're okay.
That's
Tried to make a switch to Jamie's computer, but I don't know.
Well, I
what's
switched
going
out the
on.
dongle and it seems to be okay for now, so. I switched the dongle.
So what are you saying?
So we should be okay.
But
This doesn't look okay.
I know, but, I mean, okay, I'll try again.
Okay.
Okay, we'll just take it out. We'll go old school.
We'll just go old
You
school.
can see the screen is there 1 minute and going the next, so. I have a new computer on order, you'll be happy to know.
Well, your first item was the MCAS and
Yes.
accountability.
Okay, with respect to MCAS accountability, you've seen a lot in the press over the last weekend, I'm sure. We had received preliminary MCAS results some weeks ago now, but they were embargoed by DESE until Thursday. So on Thursday, a press release was made to the various media, and many of them immediately wrote a conclusion, which was amazing to me because the new accountability system is sufficiently complicated that I can't imagine that anyone, short of having spent a month in a PhD program on analysis of data, could understand it in a short time. Nevertheless, we're going to hear a lot more about that, and the results by plan arrived here. The boxes arrived here late on Friday afternoon, and today Jamie disaggregated the contents, and the results are on way to the various schools so that they can be put together in terms of the information that needs to go to parents about their individual student results, and the information that our staff and administration will want to analyze to be ready to provide data for Jamie's report, which is going to be on August 19th. All that being said, it's important to note that we have some really good news to celebrate, and that is that 2 of our schools in Hingham, Plymouth River and South School, were recognized, and among only 52 schools in the entire state. So we're celebrating that. And we'll have a lot to celebrate about the rest of the report as well, but it's going to take us a while to put all of that together. But for the moment, congratulations. If you entered our lobby, we have balloons to celebrate that in Plymouth River and Plymouth River and South School also have balloons to celebrate that, and we're all happy. Our schools in general, in terms of the accountability, have done well. All 4 of our elementary schools are scoring in the 90s in terms of the percentile, which is great to have 4 schools and have all of them having good things to celebrate. And so you'll hear more about the details of that on the 19th. The October 1 enrollment that you have in the packet, I put together around noon today, so it's up to date. It is not a lot different from the September 10th enrollment count, which is our first official one. It was only a couple of weeks ago, so one would not expect a lot of differences there. I have sent along that enrollment chart, the one you have in front of you, to Don Kennedy at NESDEC because he, as part of the contract, committed to updating the enrollment projection with that information. While we don't expect big changes, you'll remember that we have had 10, now 9 additional kindergartners from when the data was put together that generated the August projection enrollment. And so there will be some difference because the very beginning of the data that supports a projection, not only for this year, but for the next 10 years, is that 1 kindergarten enrollment, and 9 students is a pretty good sized jump for 1 grade level and 1 at the very beginning of the process. So we'll await that, and that will become, it really will impact simply that 1 page that you all have seen multiple times in the report. So we will certainly publicize the information when we get it about the updated report, but remember that projection report, at least the one that reflects where we are now, not where we might be tomorrow when he redoes it, that is on the website if anyone wants to review the entire report. Secondary class sizes of 25 or more. When we give you the monthly reports, it's very clear what the elementary class sizes are, and it's simply not possible, given the hundreds of individual sections that we have in the secondary schools. It's not possible to put all of that on 1 page. But what we do give you every year at this time to be consistent with what our policy says is something about the secondary class sizes, and we just have always used the class sizes of the classes that are at 25 students or higher in the middle school and in the high school, and you have that information in your electronic packet. The number of such classes is down significantly at both the high school and the middle school this year, and we use for that count the core academic courses. So those are the classes in English, mathematics, social studies, foreign language, and science, because obviously there are noise coming out of this.
rebooted you, sorry. Problem solved.
Sadly, there is, sadly, there are certainly courses that one would expect to have more than 25 students, such as physical education, band, other large courses like that. But I'm looking first at the high school list, and the high school is 20 sections out of the 345 sections that we have in core subject areas, and that's 5.8%. And for those of you who don't have this in front of you, the percentages going back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I'll just go back 23.3% in 14 and 15, 14.2%, 15, 16, 15%, 16, 17, 19.3% last year, and this year 5.8%. So that's a big improvement, and not great that we have any classes that 25 or over, but actually at the high school there's 1 class of 28 of the 345, and everything else is 25 or 26. At the middle school level, we have a total of 18 individual classes at 25 or higher, 7.5% of the 240, and sections that exist at that level, and going backwards now, 17, 18, 19.3%, 16, 17, 15%. If you go back as far as 14, 15, it's 23.3%, and in 12, 13, 23.7%. So this is really good news. Now, there are some obvious reasons why it's good news. It's not just that we've added some staffing in terms of FTEs, full-time equivalents, but it's also the fact that at the middle school this year, we're down about 50 students. So one would expect that without decreasing the number of FTEs of staff, that the percentage would be smaller. Heather Rodriguez, when we were talking about this the other day at leadership team, noted that in the last year we've tried very hard to better balance class sizes. And this is something that teachers have often mentioned when we're doing our negotiating, that you could have in one subject, one class that has 16 students and another class that has 28 students. By better balancing them, which takes a lot of individual hand scheduling, you don't have as many of the extremes in either direction. So since this particular report is really only counting class sizes of 25 or higher, you're not going to have those extremes, and that has helped to reduce. So for whatever reason, and I've given you two of those reasons, this is good news overall. Next item was the homeschool policy. At the last meeting, there was a question about our practice of voting the homeschooling applications, as you know, is there a better way to do it without having to in public announce the names of people who are choosing to do homeschooling, and the school committee's discussion, or any questions or comments they might make about the plans. So in doing some research, our policy calls for the school committee to vote on homeschooling students in their plans. And we do that in that I recommend to you that this is a repeat plan, or I would recommend approving this, and then you take a vote, and it is in public and obviously on TV. This policy is written long before we had televised meetings, and so it's much more public than it was, simply because the open meeting law has different requirements. But we said we'd look into what was actually required to be done, and a lot of the language around homeschooling policies and practices and procedures relates to a long ago, I think it was 1987, Massachusetts Supreme Court judgment, and called the schooling of Charles. And so that suggests that the superintendent or the school committee can approve. However, if you read the detail of that, the superintendent or school committee can approve the plan, but the school committee has to be the ones approving the students. And therefore, there's not a way, we could change our policy a bit to be clearer about who's actually approving what my role is and what the school committee role is, but we really can't take the school committee out of the approval process, which would have to be done in a publicly posted open meeting. So I would suggest that we might want to have the policy committee take a look at our policy language and see if we want to modify it to make things clearer. But it is clear if you read all of the information in the court case. I don't know what's going on here, Jamie. It's pretty clear that you're in the business of having to approve something that you have to do at the public meeting. That being said, we don't have in this packet, we don't happen to have any more homeschooling. We only get, I would say, the average in a given year is probably 12 families over the last so many years. I don't think we've ever had more than about 16, but I would say they're 10 or 12, and many of them are repeat. And most of them take children only up to a certain point. We have very few families that homeschool at the high school level, although we've had some. In fact, not too long ago, the captain of our football team was a homeschooled student, and even through high school. So that's just a bit of cleanup information. And I want to mention some things that are at the back of your packet in the FYI section. there's information in there from the Mass Association of School Committees, and it's about a raising public awareness about what school committees actually do campaign. So you've received some of that as a separate mailing, but also as part of the newsletter that you get periodically from MASC. And MASS, not to be outdone, has its own campaign going on, and that is about the whole public funding awareness, public funding or lack thereof awareness campaign as well. So I think those are both well-written things that are well worth your reading. Also, I've included the calendar that you received at the last meeting, which is about the special reports, and Liza pointed out that there will be some additional school committee meetings, either some that are already here or others that may be scheduled that have to do with the superintendent process, and so just be aware of that, and that when those dates become available, we will either change this list if that's appropriate, or we certainly would post any of them publicly and using the 48-hour notice and so on. So it's just an FYI that this may not be the only list that you see going forward. So I think that's it for the superintendent's report.
All right.
Okay, yeah, we're ready.
Thank you. Sorry, did we need to, there was a note in here about the warrants report,
The what?
the warrant report that
Oh,
Dr.
yes,
Shires.
I will mention that. So as part of the subcommittee and other reports at the end of the meeting agenda, a couple of weeks ago, you did approve that we would handle the signing of the warrants that go from our business office to town hall in a different way, and that actually you voted on Ed being the main signer and Michelle being the alternate at that time. But the language, the new language in that suggests that the person who's doing the signing, most of the time will be Ed, needs to present a report. So we tried to make that as brief as possible, so it's a template, and at each meeting, likely, there'll be some of these warrants that have been signed, and there'll be a report that Ed will refer to in terms of how many dollars have been approved, and any comments, if there are any, that he might make on a particular warrant. So that is also in the back of your
We'll do that at the
agenda.
subcommittee? We'll do that at the subcommittee?
At the subcommittee time,
Okay.
yes.
So if you don't have a report tonight, we can do it at the next meeting, because I don't know if you have one. All right. Man comes prepared. All right. Excellent.
Forewarned is forewarned.
Very true. All right. Thank you very much. Item number, did anyone have any questions? I'm sorry. Dr. Gallo, all right. Item number 5 under communications. Do you have any communications received by yourself, Dr. Gallo?
No.
Okay. That was 5.1. 5.2 is student communications. I got an email from Emma Quilty tonight. She is very excited to be working with us again this year, but she couldn't be here tonight. The soccer team is doing a fundraiser for pediatric cancer tonight. So a worthwhile reason for her not to be here tonight, but she'll be at our next meeting on the 15th. Any other communications from anyone? I don't have any. All right. So item number 6, new business. 6.1, to receive the Hingham Middle School Improvement Plan for 2018-2019 and an update on the 2017-2018 plan progress. So Derek Smith, principal of Hingham Middle School, will present to us. Thank you. Hopefully the technological issues will not...
Well, we're moving forward with or without it, right?
Exactly.
I mean,
We're doing
it is spectacular, so I hope that it works. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to visit and get to talk about what's going on at Hingham Middle School. And as Michelle said, we're going to talk about the 2017-2018 goals and progress on those and what we have planned for this year. So,
I think we're good.
okay. So now I'm going to need to step back and get the remote that I left back at my seat. Thanks, David.
You can click or present. It should go.
Okay, thank you very much. So for 2017-2018, we established 4 goals for the Hingham Middle School, and I do struggle with the designations of complete or in progress because many of the things that we establish as goals you never want to think of as complete. But when you think of the action steps that we put in place for each of these goals, I think it is fair to deem these goals as in the complete phase. So our first was to design and implement plans and procedures to create a safe and secure school environment for teachers and students. And through that, we looked at our existing emergency protocols. David Reardon served as a member of the district-wide team that updated safety procedures and developed a new flip chart that was deployed to all schools recently. But I think more importantly, at the building level, each fall we review the work done by Synergy 911 with our teachers. During an after-school faculty meeting, we go over those procedures with the teachers, then we break off into classrooms where we do a simulation of sorts where teachers are run through the steps of a shelter-in-place, which moves into a lockdown drill, which then where teachers have to make decisions about what to do as the events unfold. That's always very well received by the teachers. The feedback on that is very positive. It gives them a sense of confidence that they are ready to handle such situations. We took our crisis team and reconfigured that into what we now call our emergency response team. That meets every other week at the building level. That's made up of building administrators, school nurses, counseling staff, our school resource officer, and every other week we discuss issues that may have come up in the community, things that we need to discuss as potential situations to be aware of, but also to discuss our policies and procedures and make sure that everybody's fresh with that. If any sort of emergency situation were to occur, that would be the team to first respond to that. And again, that team meets every other week. So we do feel that we made good progress on that goal, and in terms of the action steps, we could call that goal complete, although we will never stop working on that. That's always going to be one of our top priorities. Our next faculty meeting will be dedicated to that annual review of procedures at the building level. Our second goal had to do with mathematics. We looked at ways that we could improve student performance in the area of mathematics on state and local assessments. And we were very fortunate last year to receive some unexpected Title I funding at the middle school and put into place a Title I math program for our grade 6 students. That, in addition to the other work that is regularly done by our math department looking at assessment data. The math department regularly takes time to collaborate at the by grade level and building wide, and in addition they communicate with the elementary and high school mathematics teachers so that there's a continuity of instruction. But that Title I program we found really got to some students that we weren't able to reach previously. We put Title I tutors into place who work in the mathematics classrooms in grade 6, and then we're able to work with students that were identified in needs of support outside of that classroom. So they were able to get those students additional math instruction both during the day and an after-school program. This year we're looking at taking that and containing it all within the day, because the feedback that we received was the kids weren't thrilled to do math after school. At 2 o'clock they were ready to be done with math. So we've moved that into the daytime program, taken away the after-school component for this year. We do have a math help desk that will be in place after school for students who need support that's being supported through the Title I funding. We haven't done a hard analysis of the MCAS data at this point, as Dot said. That's something that will take some time and some real digging, but a quick look at grade 6 especially. We saw an increase in students exceeding expectations and meeting expectations, and a decrease overall in partially meeting expectations. And that's just a real mile-high view, and we haven't looked into the subgroups to really disaggregate that data, because we know that there's going to be pockets here and there that did better than others, and groups that could use a little more bolstering. But the initial analysis looks like that the things that we've been doing in mathematics, especially in grade 6, have been getting to the students that we hope to support the most. Our third goal was to expand on the tools and skills available to Hingham Middle School community members to help them meet the social and emotional needs of all students and build on the ability to respond to students in crisis. And that was continued from the previous year. With the work that was done by the HTSS group focusing on social and emotional needs of students, we felt it best to extend that beyond a one-year goal. And we did several things last year. That started the previous year, actually, but we really built on in the 17-18 year, such as our transition room. You know, we had that in place for the second half of 16-17, but it was in place fully for all of 17-18. And we did see it transform over the course of that year. And I'm sure you can recall the reports that Ali Lazat would submit to you, where at times it seemed the kids were accessing it more for injuries or illness, and that wasn't always the sole intent, although it's not a bad use of that space and that support. What we saw as time went on was we were able to target and support the students who were needing help with the social emotional. Students who previously were having a difficult time getting to school each day because of anxiety, because of social concerns. That was a real benefit to the students and families who we had not really had a strong resource for previous to last year. The anecdotal feedback from parents of those students was that their kids would not have attended school if it were not for that program. And we did see over time the students who made good use of that not only keep up with their academics, which is part of the intent, they're still receiving the work that they need in class, but we're getting them into the school each day. They're feeling good about being in the school, and slowly over time we're reintegrating them into the larger student body. So the students who took advantage of that, I think they were able to get back to their normal day-to-day, day-in and day-out procedures at the middle school. We did feel that the work that was done shifted from the medical to the emotional over the course of the year, which was really a real positive transformation. We also want to recognize that many of our students who did access it for injuries, for illness, were still reaping the benefit of having that in place, where they were able to keep up with their work. If a student was someplace on the concussion protocol, they were able to still be in school and not have to participate in physical education, or they weren't placed simply in a study. They had support from Ms. Lazat in that program. Also, one of the important steps of this goal was to try to identify a curriculum that we'll be able to put in place that would support social and emotional skills for kids, and we're making good progress on that, and we're going to hear more about that over the course of this year. The fourth goal for last year was to enhance the home school communication and connection for students and families in the HMS community. Again, to say that this is complete, I don't think we'll ever be complete with that, right? That's going to be something that we always want to pay attention to and expand on. Last year, two key developments in the middle school communication world, I'd say, were the regular dissemination of the HMS Connection, which took the place of our old school newsletter. And if you've heard me speak before, the school newsletter became a bit of a dinosaur after a while, where we would spend a good amount of time putting it together with lots of great information and pictures. And Ms. Janowitz, one of our two assistant principals, was responsible for sending that out. And it became clear that it wasn't being read regularly. She had a contest one month where anyone who turned in a raffle ticket from that newsletter would be eligible to win a prize, and we had exactly one entry, so it was easy to decide who would win the prize. So we figured we'd shift that newsletter to a bi-weekly email communication, which was well received last year. I would say that parents most appreciated our faculty spotlight every other week, where we'd take a handful of teachers and just let you know a bit about who they were, where they were from, beyond just the classroom, some of their interests, some of the things that they do to support our students outside of the classroom, the different clubs and activities and connections that they make. And we also instituted coffees before each PTO meeting that were very well attended. I think our largest meeting was one when it came time for scheduling and course selection. Typically, those meetings are held in the cafeteria, and while we have a decent turnout, there were over 50 parents who showed up for coffee that cold February morning. It happened to be Valentine's Day, so I take that as a compliment to me. The people chose to spend their Valentine's Day listening to scheduling and leveling, but it was a good forum for parents to hear information, but also ask questions on the spot. So, in addition to other ongoing efforts to keep our website up to date, we do feel that our communication is moving upwards and onwards all the time. And we had planned a few forums last year to garner feedback, but tabled those when we were going to have that town-wide forum at the middle school to give parents an opportunity to hear what each of the different schools had to say. We felt like, too many different venues would not get us the information that we had hoped to receive in those forums. If we do feel that need does reemerge, we'd be happy to have those. But between the monthly coffees and the town-wide venue, we felt like we were hearing what the parents wanted and were responding appropriately. So that was 17, 18.
Excuse me. Sorry, Derek, before you move on.
Sure.
Could you just talk a little bit about goal number 2 and how you're measuring progress on that, given that we haven't had a chance to dive into the MCAS data
So,
yet?
and when I say that we've just taken, I've got very broad lens views of the mathematics achievement last year on MCAS. I do expect the department director, Dave Jewett, and his team will go dig in deeper. So when I say that it's complete, I mean the things that we said we'd do, we did. Now, we need to see if they yielded the results at each of the subgroups in different categories that we had hoped that they would. We don't know that yet. We haven't had that close of an analysis. So this may be something we return to, and certainly, aside from our school council report, we do develop school improvement plans in the academic areas when needed. So if we do see that there's a subgroup or a population that's not getting what they need, then that would be addressed in that plan. So I don't mean to imply that we've done a deep analysis of this data at this point by any stretch of the imagination. We have just scratched the surface. So as the year moves forward, we will be looking more closely at that. I do leave that to the department director to lead his teachers in that effort, and then we do collaborate on that throughout the year. Okay? Other questions on this before I move forward? I plan to take questions at the end, but here's a good break. Liza?
So on the transition room
Yes.
reporting, if maybe in looking to the future, if there's some way of sharing the information maybe in a different way that we understand how these students with the social emotional needs are being treated. I was just glancing at, I was listening to you, I was looking at the report you had given us in June, that we can understand, seems like a lot of them were absences, and if these were students who were absent and still worried about, coming to school, then I guess it's covered in the report, or are these students at the transition rooms helping that they're still making it to school, but they're not out for an extended absence,
Right.
but then they're still having anxiety about coming to school? Are those the students that you're finding you're helping?
There's such a broad array of the
Okay.
students that are supported in that room, and it's an excellent question, Liza. There are the students who we know of that don't come to school. The parents call us and say, I can't get them to get in the car. I cannot get them out of the house. And, traditionally we've tried many different ways to get those kids there. We've offered home visits. We've offered to have an abbreviated day. And the resistance sometimes is such that we don't see a student 4 weeks at a time. Parents are calling every single day. We're trying to provide the supports that we can. Sometimes, we don't like to just send home papers because that's not education, right? That's work. That's not learning. That's not teaching. So as that develops with a student, we do put forward the transition room. Sometimes it takes several offers before the parent and the student are comfortable with it. They have to visit, they have to see it, they have to trust the persons they're going to be with. So in some cases it is that extended absence. In other cases it's a student who during the school day is visiting the nurse every other block, right? You know, they're escaping. They go to the bathroom during lunch and stay there, you know, because they're overwhelmed. So as those needs emerge and become identified, we refer them to the transition room. So if what you're looking for is for us to break down that data to the point of what initiates the referral, we can look at that going forward. You know, is this a student who we were concerned about excessive absences? Is this teacher reporting? You know, if that's useful information in transition room reporting, we can try to find a way to incorporate that.
I guess what we've talked about, it's been a concern of mine, and I think others had brought it up, was when we get the report,
Yes.
there's an extensive list of kids who should be in gym class but have an injury, and so they're in the transition room. And so if we look at that and remove that, and then are these kids using the transition room who are strictly coming back from an absence?
I see what you're saying.
Or, so, I guess to provide us a little more information without jeopardizing confidentiality.
Of course.
I
Right.
definitely don't want to do that.
Right.
But understanding how the space and the personnel
Mhm.
are being used.
Right, and I know
to
Ms.
make
Liz-
sure that, you know,
It's what we
worthwhile,
intended.
and,
Yeah.
you know, or could we even take care of more kids, or
Mhm.
cover more kids,
Mhm.
or not, or
Sure.
do you, so, I guess the way it's presented now with all the gym class
Right.
excused absences maybe overshadows the other deeper work that the room is being used for. Maybe
Mhm.
that
Right.
is.
And I do know that Ms. Lizotte did, she did adjust her reporting as the year went on last year, and I think that it gave some of what you were looking for. And I do want to come back to the fact that by and large, the students who are accessing that room are kids who need it for social and emotional needs. We do use it for other things, but what we do is make sure that we're meeting the needs of those who need it most first.
Yeah.
And if we can if that can be reflected in the reporting, I'll make sure that we
Yeah,
adjust our
I
reports
think-
to do so.
I think that would be
Sure.
helpful.
All right.
The first report actually arrived about 5 o'clock this afternoon.
That's right.
So I
Oh.
can ship that to you tomorrow, but it was only
Oh,
a
you
total
can save for the
of
next
9
meeting.
students for September, as you might expect,
Yeah.
although I think we've had more in the past,
Mhm.
particularly in the high school. But there is, so since there are only 9, there isn't a graph, but there is a summary of the kinds of needs, and I think there's only one phys ed thing.
It is
so-
alarming, the number of injuries there are
is.
in middle school,
It is.
especially compared to the high school.
Mhm.
But, you know, that's a whole different issue, but just,
Wait till ski season starts.
yeah.
All right. Any other questions on 17-18 before we move on? All right. Thank you very much. So this year, again, we have 4 goals, and you know, they're not going to sound all too unfamiliar, but I think they're important ones. Again, we are looking to provide students with the tools and supports needed to grow into compassionate, caring, resilient learners capable of taking care of themselves and others. That sounds an awful lot like what we've been doing all along, doesn't it? But it really is building on some of the work that's been done district-wide and taking a deeper look at what we can do at the middle school level. For example, we're hoping this year to identify and pilot a social skills curriculum that's going to take what the elementary school has been running with, this toolbox that we've heard so much about, and build a bridge to the middle school. You know, the training happened to be held at the middle school, and there was a lot of excitement as those teachers left the building each day. So we're looking to see if we can capitalize on that. And we're going to be looking at what we can do in terms of identifying a curriculum and putting something into place over the course of this year. We were very fortunate to have our counseling services expanded this year with the addition of a school counselor, which was included in the budget last year. Thank you very much. That was outstanding. And then another one of those Title I surprises in the summer where we were able to add a .8 school adjustment counselor / social worker. So we have 1.8 FTEs in the counseling department. And we are really excited about the work that we're able to do with those 2 individuals. With the Title I person, we've already started looking at grade 6 students who were identified at the elementary level as needing some support around the transition. So she's got small groups that she's working with already. And our additional school counselor has been getting to know the lay of the land in terms of the middle school, but also taking on the very complex role of 504 plans as they relate to middle school students. And we're building in more of a transition type counselor who will work with our kids as they come up from the elementary school, but also help them prepare for their move to the high school at the end of the school year. And along the way, there are going to be a variety of different roles that person plays. But it is going to be a complement to the one counselor, one class structure that we've had for so long. We really, really appreciate the relationships that our counselors build with students and families by being with them for 3 years. So we didn't want to touch that when we were lucky enough to get that additional counselor. We wanted to complement it. And by doing that, taking some of these responsibilities out of the offices of the person with those kids year to year, we allow them to see more kids, whether it be kids who are struggling with a situation academically, socially, emotionally. Those counselors are able to focus on that and take some of the bureaucracy and paperwork and put that aside. But also, this person will be able to do some group work with students and provide some counseling services that we struggled to get to with the caseload that our counselors had previously. And with one counselor working with over 300 kids, it is very difficult for them to get to every student that needs them. They try, they do a tremendous job, but it's really the numbers just don't work. Adding just one person is going to free them up in many different ways. So we're really looking forward to what we can put into place as the year goes on there. We're also, interested in looking at what can the middle school do differently without taking away what is the middle school. As kids come up to us from the elementary school, they've worked in RTI models. They've had Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, both in academic and in social emotional. And that's really a difficult concept to put over the structure of a traditional middle school with your 7 blocks a day and kids moving every 47 minutes. So we're trying to look at a way to not take away what we've been doing for so long, but taking it and adjusting a little bit to build in some flexible scheduling time. We've got some ideas that we're going to explore, things that we might even be able to try on pilot at a point this year that wouldn't be too disruptive to how we do our day-to-day business, but allows us to steal a 20-minute block here and there once or twice a week where kids can get some Tier 2 interventions, both in the academic and in the social emotional. We want to proceed slowly, as always, to make sure that we don't rush into something and not have it work. We want to make sure that we are prepared for what we're going to get when we open the door to this. But we do have some exciting thoughts about how we can do that without tearing down the structure that is already in place. Again, looking at the continuum of social emotional and how we support our kids, we're looking at grades 7 to 12. We're looking to develop an overarching structure where kids don't necessarily get a curriculum presented to them on an ongoing basis, but have themes and concepts that they have presentations on, that they're involved in those presentations, and then given an opportunity to discuss them afterwards. We are at the middle school level looking to introduce regular grade level assemblies starting next month. It's not going to be on a monthly basis, but on a growing basis where it's almost like a class meeting for middle school. So we have all the kids come together. We talk about any school business that we need them to be aware of, but then have a theme that we want to introduce to them. So that is something that we look to put in place this year. And also some school-wide events to celebrate inclusion, acceptance, and tolerance. If you followed middle school at all, you would have seen that last week we took part in Start With Hello Week, which was phenomenal. It's a nationwide initiative that grew out of the tragedy in Sandy Hook to have students reach out to one another, to have adults make every kid feel included, to help take away the feeling of social isolation. And I feel that is no place more important than at the middle school level, where students can go an entire day, if not days, not having a conversation with a person because every 47 minutes they're in a new group and nobody knows they haven't said a word all day. So the goal all last week was to make sure that no student felt alone. And if you visited our cafeteria at all during those days, it was pretty awesome. We saw kids scouring the tables, making sure that nobody sat by themselves, nobody had lunch by themselves if they didn't want to. You know, we made sure that kids felt connected and involved. You know, we dressed it up in some fun themes. There was a mix and match day. One day was pajama day with the idea that you're going to wake up ready to be kind. It was great. It was really well received. We're going to look to put more theme weeks like that. We know that in December is Inclusive Schools Week, first week of December, so we've already started talks and plans about that. And our fourth goal, sorry, I lost my place there. We're looking to provide students, teachers, and parents the tools and information and experiences needed to make the transition from elementary to middle school. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place here. All these goals I'm going to circle back to goal number 2. We're going to expand our science, technology, and computer science experiences to provide opportunities for students in and out of the classroom. Obviously, this is something that is very important in this day and age to make sure that our students have opportunities in the computer science realm. We have expanded our STEM programming to grades 7 and 8 with an elective for the first time this year. It was instantly at capacity. We are looking to explore the possibility of direct computer science instruction at the middle school, which we have not had for quite a time. And also to assess the one-to-one computing initiative in order to make any needed adjustments or updates. We've been in our 5th year of the Chromebook initiative. Things are going well, but we want to see if it's still functioning the way that we had initially intended. Goal number 3. We want to assist students in making healthy choices and developing positive personal habits for now and in the future. This grows out of some of the things that we saw last year in terms of student behavior in and out of middle school. Most prevalent was vaping. You know, we heard so much about that. We were able to bring in some presenters for parents and students last year, but it made us realize that as robust as our health curriculum is and our DARE program is, we need to make sure that we're empowering students to make good and healthy decisions. So we will be administering the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. We've already done the SBIRT, so we will take the information from those 2 surveys to see if we have areas that we need to focus on in order to provide additional support. We're going to make sure that our curriculum in health and DARE are still getting to what we need them to get to, and provide parent education opportunities on teen health topics in order to deliver a consistent message. And finally, goal number 4. We're going to provide students, teachers, and parents the tools and information and experiences needed to make the transition from elementary to middle school the smoothest one possible. Again, this is something that we talk about year after year, and I think that we've made real good progress with this, but it's something that I think never goes away. The move from 5th to 6th grade is, I think, the biggest change in a student's educational career. They go from that elementary school where they have 1, maybe 2 teachers and a small pot of kids into the larger middle school with over 1,000 kids and 7 different teachers a day. Our teachers do such a wonderful job of meeting those kids where they are and helping them make the adjustment to middle school, preparing them for that big change. But I want to make sure that we're doing everything possible. Last year we introduced with Ms. Gustafson some drop-in summer tours for the first time. So there were 3 Wednesdays over the course of the summer that parents could bring their kids in for an hour just to get acclimated, just to feel a little bit more comfortable. It, I think, made a huge difference. I thought, well, we'll throw this out there and see what happens. Maybe we'll get 1 or 2 families. There were, I think, upwards of 30 kids at some of those mornings, so obviously it tapped into a need. We're going to continue to build our bridge between the middle and elementary school. A few years ago, we invited our elementary colleagues to the middle school to see what it's like on a daily basis, to see how the middle school operates so that they can speak with authority to parents, because in my opinion, those 5th grade teachers are our best advocates to parents. Their parents trust them with their children. They're going to trust them if they tell them the middle school is ready to pick up where they left off. So we want them to come to the middle school and see what it's like on a daily basis. We did it a few years ago. It's very well received with both general and special education teachers. We want to bring it back again this year. So that is what we have planned for this year. Sorry about the jumping around. I feel like I've been up here for an hour and I lost my place. So do people have questions about what we are going to try to accomplish in the 2018-2019 school year?
Yeah, I do,
Karen.
actually.
Yes.
So this is my first school council report on school committee, so I was doing some reading online about what should be in these and what the purpose of them is. And there are a number of elements that I didn't see in here, and so I wanted to get your thoughts on this. So one is an assessment of the impact of the class size on student performance, student-to-teacher ratios, and the ratios of students to other supportive adult resources, and a plan for reducing class sizes if that's necessary. Also professional development, and the allocation of any funds from the school budget, the enhancement of parental involvement. I didn't see anything about that. School safety and discipline you had, extracurricular activities, and this one, means for meeting within regular education programs at the school the diverse learning needs for as many children as possible, including children with special needs currently assigned to separate programs.
So in terms of the class size issue, I think Dr. Yellow spoke to that earlier with the steps that have been taken in terms of district-wide, how we've reduced class size. This plan doesn't speak to that. We don't address that in this school improvement plan.
These are elements that are required by the Department of Ed, so that's why I was wondering why they weren't in there.
Okay. This is the format that's been followed for as long as I've been principal and preceding that. So if there are elements that need to be reincorporated, I'd be happy to go back and redraft the plan so that it meets the committee's approval. Yeah. In terms of professional development, we do plan to provide teachers with professional development opportunities related to goals that we discuss. Obviously, we wouldn't try to just throw teachers into the deep end of the pool with any of these things without professional development activities being provided. Although our professional development for this school year is set, so many of those activities do support these goals.
Right.
And I can go through those activities and attach them to these goals if that would be helpful. And I'm sorry, your third point?
There are a few. There's parental enhancement of parental involvement in the life of the school. And then,
we do plan to offer parent education activities as we do each year, and we do plan to relate them to the goals, especially assisting students in making healthy choices. We've had parent education activities in the past related to these topics. We will continue to have those. We try to involve our parents through our monthly PTO meetings and get them in to solicit feedback on a regular basis. And the school council in and of itself solicits parent feedback, having 2 parent members who are involved on a monthly basis.
Right. I was wondering because I was surprised that there's no mention of the PTO in there. So they
okay.
But
sometimes I just assume things I shouldn't.
I know. And then you also talked about having speakers come in on parent topics. So I assumed you'd be working with them on that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we'd be nowhere without our PTO.
Right. Also, extracurricular activities.
Well, it's funny you should mention extracurricular activities because I'm going to segue to Mr. Reardon and Mrs. J in just a moment, and they're going to talk about what makes Hingham Middle School special outside of the classroom.
Okay, great.
Okay?
And it's something the school council will be addressing as well?
We can certainly have our esteemed assistant principals join our school council to share that information with them, and they always are welcome to offer feedback and suggestions as to what would be good additions to our extracurricular offerings. Keep in mind that we are limited in what we can offer on an extracurricular basis. We are limited by our budget, and the clubs that are approved by the school committee. We can't just pop new clubs up, although this year and every year in the fall we have a number of teachers who come to us with great ideas, and I'd love to move forward with all of them, but we can't because there's a procedure that needs to be followed. We need to bring those clubs forward. We need to discuss them with this body and make sure that we have the funding available to them.
Okay. And then the final one was the means for meeting within the regular education programs at the school, the diverse learning needs of as many children as possible, including students with special needs currently assigned to separate programs.
So in terms of, meeting the needs of all learners, which is, I think the goal of every school and something that we all aim to do, I think that these goals, by and large, should seek to make all students feel included and connected. And it's something that we work as an entire community towards, not just the Hingham Middle School, but every school. Again, if there's elements of this that we need to have reflected in our school council plan, happy to go back to the drawing board and bring them forward to you at a future date.
Okay, great.
Okay?
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Well, to Kerry's point, what goes on besides just the classroom stuff. This year, if you spend any time at Hingham Middle School, and hopefully previous to this year, you hear us talk about the importance of relationships, okay? We firmly believe that students don't learn from people unless they believe they care about them. Teacher to student relationship, student to student relationship, we feel that that is the bedrock of any good school. And that is enhanced, if not absolutely dependent upon what happens outside of the classroom and the school day. And just to talk a little bit about that, I'm going to bring forward David Reardon and Allison Janowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you for having us here this evening. And we just want to reiterate some of the things Mr. Smith touched on with the school council goals. The common philosophy amongst our administrative team and our teaching staff is that our kids need to feel connected to Hingham Middle School in order to be successful. If they're happy there, if they're connected, they feel like we care about them, they're going to be successful. It's not only the right thing to do academically, but we keep going back to social and emotional. It's the right thing to do socially and emotionally. We want every one of our 1,000 and however many students to have that favorite class, favorite club and activity, that favorite teacher that they're going to see every day, possibly in the same place every time for that one little hello. That's what keeps them connected. Maybe it's that after-school activity that they have that's they look so forward to that keeps them connected to Hingham Middle School, and that's what keeps them on that trail of success. If our students feel that we care about them, they'll be more successful. For me, we have a few slides here that Mrs. J is going to talk about in just a minute. For me, I look at late buses. We have just over 1,000 students at our school, and on any given day, there's over 100 students on the late buses. 4 different late buses, that's 10%. Considering all the outside activities that our kids have, 10% stay after school, extra help with a teacher, intramurals, a club, that's incredible. And it really reassures me that we're on the right path, not only with our structured social and emotional approach, but just the teachers in the hallway, the teachers in the cafeteria, striving to make connections with the kids, knowing that it's going to pay off in the classroom. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Mrs. J with a few slides.
Good evening, everybody. Just a pictorial representation. This was actually a live, almost live picture from today at Camp Wing. Our 6th graders go to Camp Wing every year, depending on the schedule, sometimes in the fall, sometimes in the spring. We really love it when they can get there in the fall because it helps them build those relationships with one another early in the school year. And they learn different things about each other and about themselves on the Camp Wing trip. So that's another way that they can feel connected to the school by feeling connected to each other and new classmates and new people that they're getting to know. In terms of after-school activities, this is a cute, good school spirit. We have soccer intramurals, another 6th grade activity. We have different classes compete against different other classes, and it's a great structure, but the kids are out there running around. We have participation goals, so even if there aren't a lot of goals scored on the field, there's still a participation goal that can boost the score. The Adventure Club. So this is a picture taken last spring. You can see the kids really enjoying getting out and having a kayaking adventure. And it's, again, just another way for kids who enjoy the outdoors, who want to do something else beyond the school day to really get involved with staff members and other students as well. Oh, that's it. Okay. Okay. So then, beyond the pictures, I've jotted down a few things that are either coming up or starting this week. We have our PAW Club, which is Poets, Artists, and Writers. The yearbook committee is going to be starting up soon. There's been flag football going on. Excuse me. Our Future City Club, and also our Homework Club, which is another great place for kids to just drop in and get some homework done. I had a very sweet 6th grader come up to me after school, I think it was one day last week, and he said, "Are there any programs after school?" Like, he was just ready to stay. He didn't know what he was staying for. He was just ready to stay. And he wanted to figure out something to do after school, which was great. They just know there's extra stuff going on, and they're going to try to figure out what it is. So we're happy to support all of these extras for them. Any questions we can answer about that?
If I could just add, though, I mean, you know, the few pictures that we've seen are camping, they're kayaking, there's soccer. But as Ms. J said, there's something for everybody. If you are into writing, there's the Poets, Artists, and Writers. If you have a community service itch that needs to be scratched, you can join the Ambassador Club. We have, as Ms. J referred to, the Homework Club, Lego Robotics, Future Cities. We try to find something that appeals to every interest. You know, typically kids think, I don't like sports, so there's nothing for me after school. That's not true at Hingham Middle School, because as we keep saying, it's about relationships. And for every interest that a student has, there's a teacher that has an interest that matches it. You know, we've had such a variety of after-school programming in the time that we've been there. It is the only middle school that I know of that ever had a snowshoeing club. We had a particularly snowy winter. Kids approached our teachers, said, "This is what we want to do after school." They loved it. So we do look to make sure that we offer those extracurricular activities that match the interests of the students, so that the school day doesn't end at 2 o'clock and they don't think of school as the place where they go to get homework, but a place where they go to build relationships. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Yes, Liza.
So the 8th grade trip the last couple of years, big success, and citizenship program even for the kids that stayed here.
Yes.
I heard it might be evolving into something
We are
new and exciting this year.
Absolutely, yes.
Are you ready to announce that? Or
Well, I'd be happy to talk in general terms, and I
Yeah.
am going to come back and ask for another audience with the school
Yeah.
committee to lay out the specifics of the program. But whereas in the past we have focused on DC and DC alone, our social studies department teachers came forward and said, we'd like to broaden that trip a little bit. And they want to get to Gettysburg, and they want to go to Philadelphia, and do this all in the same time frame. So we're exploring how that's going to look. We do have a plan in place, a program that we're almost ready to announce, but I felt that it would be not prudent to publicize that widely until we had discussions here.
Okay.
But your question is an excellent one. The 8th grade trip will continue, it will evolve. We will still have the trip component, and as we've come to refer to it, it's Civics Week.
Yeah.
So students who can't, don't, or won't travel stay back here, and they immerse themselves in the world of civics at the local level. I have...
Just add, Mr. Smith,
Yes.
I've noticed in the past few years, like with any project, slowly the small kinks get worked out.
Yeah.
And that trip has become more and more solid, that whole civics
Yeah.
week. So last year, the 8th graders I was the assistant principal of the 8th grade, and not looking terribly forward to spending Washington, D.C. And that's as a former history teacher, and I've been there several times. And I had a fantastic time, so much so that this year, while I'm with the 7th graders, I might, volunteer to go with the 8th graders, especially with the new program. There's some very solid leadership with Civics Week among our faculty, and they're already looking at the details for this year to make it, better for the kids. And the kids were just fantastic. They were great, and even at the long bus ride, they just, smiled on their faces.
Oh, yeah, no, it's great, and even I've heard that the kids that stay here have an excellent experience, and we're very
Absolutely.
fortunate where we live that there are a lot of relevant.
Very aware to make that,
Yeah.
If not equal, comparable, and good memories as well.
And if it meets the state standards, bonus, and we're done, and check that off, and don't have to change anything, but.
It sure will.
Yeah. that's
Thanks for the
great.
question.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Thank you all for your time. Thank you for your feedback and your questions. Have a great evening.
All right, thank you for coming. Thank you.
So that was great. I just wanted, just procedurally, since we're supposed to approve the school council plans, can I request that we postpone until the elements are added back in that we discussed?
Do you want to, do you have a question or comment? Oh, okay. Yes, so if that is procedurally, we approve the plans,
We don't,
sorry.
we don't need to approve.
We don't need to approve. Okay.
The state has gone back and forth on this when school council plans first came along. That we needed to have school committee approval, and then it was simply the superintendent approval, and they came here. And I'm not aware that that has changed back again for a third time.
So I'm on the website right now. And it says, may a school committee approve or disapprove parts of the school improvement plan? Yes. It's an ongoing conversation, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead. No, it's, the process of review can be an ongoing conversation between the school committee and the school site councils and its school district. Unapproved elements of the plan can be sent back to the sites for further development and can be resubmitted in a revised form, which is kind of what we just talked about. So that's,
Okay. So does the site, and this is, sorry, the DOE?
yes.
And does that say that the school committee does have to approve? Or does it sort of leave it open that it can be?
Yes, it says if we fail to take action within 30 calendar days, it's automatically approved, according to the DOE.
Okay.
So, which is why I'm
So-
asking. that we-
Okay, I'm with you. Okay.
So would it make sense to table the discussion
Yeah.
until such time as we can do the research and then come back with a proposal? Because that's not only affects the middle school plan, but also all other school
Right.
plans. So,
And I'm happy to share this with.
no, we
everyone.
can, yeah, I
Okay.
understand. It's just,
Okay.
this isn't my area of expertise, so to pull it off the top of my head, I
Sure.
don't know that, I don't have that there now. So I think what it may make sense is to table the conversation
Mm-hmm.
until such time as we can come back with some guidance and also give clearer expectations to our schools relative to what to bring forward. Now, I think what also we want to be reflective of is what we were being presented was just a status update on the goals for what was completed and what was proposed. And that's not necessarily the entire school improvement plan. Does that make sense? Which is a full document. So we'll make sure that we have complementary school improvement plans as well as a presentation that reflects the research and the work that was done to develop those goals. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I
that'd
think
be
what we
great.
just got was the goals,
Yep.
as opposed to seeing the research and the work that was done by the school council to develop those goals. So we'll make sure going forward that all the schools bring what they need to bring. But just on the issue of the approval,
Yeah.
as opposed to going, it might make sense just to pause and we'll
Yes.
go back and do the research and come back with a response for next school committee.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Darius. Thank you, Jamie, for clarifying that. All right, so moving on to new business 6.2, to hear an update on the school committee planning meeting held on September 15th. So the school committee, along with Dr. Gallo, Dr. LaBla, Mr. Ferris, Dr. Vinnis, had our annual September Saturday planning meeting. We spent about 4 hours together. It's supposed to be a little less than that, but my fault. So we spent about 4 hours together, and I'll just give a pretty brief overview of what we talked about. Liza's going to talk a little bit about the 5-year vision. But at that meeting, we discussed, and we got an enrollment update from the administration. We discussed the 5-year vision plan that we put together that was introduced last year. We went over what subcommittee goals might be for the year. We sort of left it that each subcommittee could come up with their goals for the year. We had a budget discussion, very preliminary, just sort of general, no dollars, numbers being thrown about, but sort of a general overview of the budget process, what we will be thinking about this year, what we'll be focusing on. We had a great discussion about fees and the philosophy that this particular school committee has as it pertains to fees. And it was very broad, so we weren't discussing athletic fees in general or in particular or full-day kindergarten fees. It was really just a conversation about what do we believe fees should be doing. Is it a budget offset? Is it a revenue generator? Is it a user fee? So we sort of had general discussion around our fees philosophy. We didn't really come to a conclusion, but sort of a work in progress. But we had wanted to start that conversation prior to the budget process. And then we did some work on some updating the frequently asked questions relative to the superintendent search. But it was a great meeting, and it's a really great meeting. I mean, it's a Saturday morning that we take out of our time, but I think it's a nice way to get together and sort of go over what we've got coming up for the year. So unless anybody, well, I'll let Liza give us a little 5-year vision.
Yeah, so one of the tasks that we worked on was updating the 5-year financial vision, because the one that has been posted on the website was from the previous school committee class. And so I took the comments that we all discussed and updated it, and so that it can reflect this body's vision for the next, the long-term vision. So I wanted to check if anybody could read the small print.
I was trying.
If you guys were, if you saw anything significant that I missed, or if we were consistent, I would say, for the community, we didn't add any major topics to this, but that we tried to reflect changes in the community of, looking out what are new developments going, how are they going to impact enrollment, and how are state standards, state requirements going to impact us, such as technology, and then our own initiatives with special education, social emotional learning, and personnel changes. Probably the one major thing we added is addressing green community initiative topics, but other than that, we just kind of shifted things around from when actions would be taken. So if everyone is good with this, then we can put it on the website and to share with the community.
It is hard to read, though. Is there any way we can?
I can format it to make it more visible, or larger type on the website, but this was, in saving it as a PDF, it scrunched it down to the
I see,
single
okay.
page. And I think I can work on that.
You can blow up the
Enlarge
font.
it on your screen.
I'm looking at it big here.
I
was
tried
able to
zooming
do,
in. It's
I can see it.
my eyes. I don't think I can zoom it in anymore.
Just keep moving.
So I'm assuming everyone looked at it already, but I guess if anyone has comments or anything they want to see
Plus, you can keep
that they
doing
think we
plus,
missed, maybe let you know
just
by
goes up and down, see?
Wednesday?
Mhm.
So you can, by Wednesday? Is that
Then
good,
you
Liza?
can
Yeah, and, we're
I mean, it's a work in
scroll
progress,
with
so-
the team, but-
well, yeah, we're not gonna, just if you can reflect on your notes from the meeting, so that, because it was all of us together that came to agreement that this is the vision. So I don't wanna start adding an individual's topic outside of a meeting. But if I missed something, an error, I'd be glad to change it.
Yes, sorry,
Yeah.
that's what I meant. Yeah, so if anybody has any edits that they
Yeah.
feel need to be made.
Yeah,
let
but
Liza
I
know.
tried to keep previous notes or detailed notes.
Yes, no.
like I said, So, okay, great, thank you.
All right, thank you. Item 6.3, to receive a bid for a special education van and act as recommended by our Director of Business and Support Services.
Yes,
Do you have a-
I put a letter into the packet
Yep.
For the van. We went out to bid for the van, and we received 2 bidders. And the lowest bidder came in at $38,617, and the other bidder came in at $39,812. So I recommend that we award to the lowest bidder, which was New England Wheels, which has a vendor we've worked with literally every year. It seems to be, they always come in a few $100s below the closest competitor, and they've been a very good vendor, and I would recommend we award the bid to them for the 7D van in the amount of $38,617.
All right. Thank you.
I'll make a motion that we purchase one 2018 7D 10-passenger transportation van at the price of $38,617 from New England Wheels Incorporated.
I'll second.
Second, thank you, Carrie. Any discussion, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, great.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you, John. All right, item 6.4, to receive a draft of the fiscal year 2020 budget guiding principles.
So what you have in your packet is a copy of last year's guiding principles. Guiding principles are exactly that, principles, and so there's not a lot of change in many of them from year to year. But we did review the principles that we had for last year, we being John and me, and you have a red line copy of last year's principles edited. You see the red line changes there, as we would propose for the guiding principles for the FY 2020 school year. So we expect that the school committee will adopt guiding principles, either these or some edited version. We're not asking for that vote for this evening, to give you a chance to give some thought to this, but some of these things may reflect what we've talked about in the planning meetings. Some of the things need to be there from one year to the next, but this is really the beginning of the budget process in terms of what we're proposing. The things that we would note particularly are in the first line of the growing special education costs. It's really interesting that this afternoon, when I opened the mail, there were 6 private schools, special education schools, who have requested what they call construction adjustment pricing for the next school year, not this school year, in terms of the tuition, and these requests go to the Operational Services Division for approval, and we don't hear about the approval till later in the spring, but usually we get only 1 or 2 of these notices. Schools are required to submit if they're looking for some unusual tuition increase, which could be because it's a new program, or additional services that are needed in a program, or sometimes just to keep up with the staffing costs and the salaries that are needed to attract people, because they're competing with us, public schools that have unions and scales and all of that. But in particular, with respect to the special ed tuitions, I've not seen come in any one day's mail, and there's a deadline by which they have to submit these requests to the state. And there were 6 schools, and each one of these 6 schools has a student that is a Hingham student, and the costs are very large. And you know, last year when we did the tuitions part of the special ed budget, there was a tremendous increase in the tuitions for a number of these schools into the $300,000 to the $300,000 range. So that's a reality. Now, we don't have more students that are out of district. In fact, today we have 48 students. Last year we ended the year with 51. About 5 years ago we had a year when there were as many as 60 students. So it's not that we have more students, which is a good thing, because we hope that most of our children can be educated here in our schools. There are some who simply can't be, but it's not more students. It's that the services that are required in these schools result in very high tuitions, and so that's why that was added there, the growing special education costs. And number 3, new number 3, references our significant discussion both as part of last year's budget process and as part of our planning meeting about our need in this office for some additional staffing. ideally a human relations director or personnel director, whatever title we determine, and support, clerical support for that role is a huge need and want, and I think a common consensus on that by members of the school committee. So that changed the numbering as well, and then funding the digital literacy and computer science requirements that we now have, and we've made taken some very good steps, particularly at the elementary, and you heard Derek mention the middle school level as well along that line. So there may be some additional funding that will be needed there as part of our budget. And then lastly, what is now number 8, that the budget needs to reflect costs as we know them, or as in the case of utilities, for example, where we can project them, but that then those costs are offset by local fees and revenues and state and federal grants, and particularly including the Mass Circuit Breaker funding and the federal IDEA funding that offsets some of the budget costs that we have. So those are our proposals. So we could answer questions, or you might make comments tonight, but we would be intending for you to vote on this, or whatever version you decide upon at the meeting of October 15th. But we wanted you to have a chance to look at what we're thinking and see whether or not you want to add or delete or amend in some way.
I had a suggestion on number 3 to flush, or to add to that.
Number 3.
Number 3, to provide needed personnel
new
support.
number 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can share with you after, but adding the number of employees, that with 6 bargaining units, there have been changes in federal and state mandates in human resources domain since 2006, but to add some more to it,
Okay.
to kind of explain it.
Sure.
So because we've done that with the others, and and I was also thinking of, maybe do we even say, instead of in the human resources area, say in particular the human resources area, because this may build, we may find that we need more central office staffing in the future. And so by adding the word particular, we're starting with human resources, but that looking to future budget guidelines, it may be an area that we address. Because that might not only be human resources.
And some of that, of course, is going to depend upon the job description that we develop.
Right.
In terms of what kind of expertise we need there.
But I can flesh this out with you.
All right,
and
thank
share
you.
it with you, but
Good.
that was my only big thing is, I think I want to beef it up.
Yeah, that needs a little more texture.
Yeah.
I agree with that too, and I was thinking from when we looked at the job descriptions of what human resources directors do, it's actually more like compliance and operations. It's not so much just human resources, you know. It's keeping track of the steps and lanes. It's a lot of, I don't know, so we might want to think about what we call it too.
Right. We do have, I was at a Lighthouse meeting last week and asked the South Shore communities who were there, who had personnel directors or human resources directors, and there were 3 in our area. One, I believe, was Duxbury, one is Situate, and they were in our group of benchmark towns. And the other, I believe, was Marshfield. But anyway, each one of these people I asked to send me a copy of their job description and salary, and they ranged from a salary of $69,000, which seems to me was probably more a support role, up to a full administrative salary.
Situates is just in the last couple of years for these the same reasons we're identifying, but I had noted them too when we were doing the
I may
research.
even have that information because I reached out to them not too long ago, to Situate and to Duxbury. I don't know if I have the salary information, but I definitely have, I think, the job descriptions.
Yeah, we did that brief survey that went to our benchmark towns, and we got only 9 that were back. but then there are some additional information coming from a couple of local ones, so.
Thank you. Thank you for drafting this. So does anyone have any other comments on this now? Or if you do have comments, get them back to Dr. Gallo, because we'll vote on this at the next school committee meeting. All right, thank you. Section 6.5, to receive a draft of the fiscal year 2020 budget calendar, which is
This
in
is
your
kind of a
packets.
lengthy calendar that John put together, very typical, where we really have the time between now and January 1st, which is all of the activities that are associated with developing the budget. And some of that relates to your adoption of this calendar and the guidelines. Some of it results from John sending out to our principals and other administrators the information about submitting their book, and then the different due dates for the different aspects of that budget, and all of that gets to us. And I've forgotten the week in November, but maybe it's here. The 5th through the 9th, so then Jamie and I meet with each of the principals for about a 2-hour period, and we review all of the things that they've submitted. And this budget book has in it, for people who are new, the budget book that they submit has in it information about staffing that they may be requesting, information about textbooks, about technology, a whole bunch of things, capital requests and equipment requests and so on. And we go over it mainly to be sure that we understand what they're asking for and are able to ask questions and clarify the rationales they submit, because they do have to submit rationale. And so we meet with the 6 principals and some of the directors. There were different guidelines for directors, such as Suzanne, to submit her information, different timeline for Joe Andrews to submit the technology information and so on. And that all of that information is now compiled, and while we're doing that, John is preparing what I would call the template of the basic structural things, such as utilities costs and the different contracts that we have to reflect in the budget, both personnel and things like the bus lease and so on. And then he puts all of those things together. We sit together and talk about which of those newer needs or initiatives that have been identified by principals we think can be included, given all that we know about what the requests out there are. And then you get, by the 1st of January, the budget message, which comes from me, which identifies the scope of the budget and the things that it includes, and which of those things are new things. And our plan to give to you is a level services budget, which is what is being requested on the town side. What we request of our employees is what their needs are. And so that difference between the level, between the needs-based budget, which is what we get from our employees, and the level services budget that goes to all of you first, and ultimately to the Board of Selectmen and the Advisory Committee. That change, that recommendation comes from this office. So I want to clarify that. We want our employees to tell us what they need. We want to tell the town what we think level services needs are. And of course you have to take a vote on that, as they do. But we make the decision here about what things that have been asked for that we can justify putting in the level services budget. So, and then the process after that is the period, about a month in January, where we present the budget detail to you, and then at some point we make a presentation to the Board of Selectmen, make a joint presentation actually to the Selectmen and the Advisory Committee. We get a vote from the Board of Selectmen, we get a vote from the Advisory Committee with a lot of work in between the school committee, the administration, and the Education Subcommittee of the Advisory Committee. And somehow, after all that and all those meetings, we get to the April town meeting, where everything becomes official, and usually we get there with good spirit, and what I always say is, a fair allocation of the resources that are available. So it's not a lot different. There are a lot of empty spaces there in terms of dates that need to be set, and sometimes some of these things, particularly toward the end of the process, dates get moved and changed for a whole bunch of usually very good reasons. But this is the framework that is typical for Hingham.
Thank you. All right,
So you don't have to approve this in a formal vote. You do have to vote on the guidelines. You don't have to approve this calendar. You make suggestions or ask questions, but we don't need a formal vote here.
okay.
And we'll be updating the calendar too as we go through. Some things may change, and
Yep.
once we know dates, we'll stick the dates in. It becomes a good tool to keep us all on track, because there's a lot of activity going on, a lot of different meetings and different groups and subcommittees, and it's a good tool to have to know what's coming next.
All right, okay, thank you. I do know that January 26th meeting will not be on January 26th.
Okay.
But I'm waiting to hear back from AdCom
Okay,
on
that's
that
fine.
date. All right, thank you very much. Okay, item 6.6, to receive an end-of-cycle update of the superintendent's 2017-2018 goals from Dr. Gallo.
Okay, so you have a written report with the detail about the actual steps that have been taken, and I'm not going to attempt to go through all of that. What I am going to do is to present a few slides to you that look at, so we have a goal, we have action steps, we complete them, but what most people are interested in is the kind of, well, so what? So what's going to happen as a result of these goals and the steps that were completed, or the steps that may have changed over time. And I'm trying to find this. So these are comments on the goals. You have a lot of detail there. This is more looking at a broader picture. So I'll go through all of them, and then hopefully we can come back and deal with questions. So the black print there is what the original goal was. Obviously, Liz has moved on, and Suzanne has replaced her, but at the time, these goals, by the way, relate to the superintendent's evaluation and the cycle of these goals, unlike the school council goals which go the length of the school year. These goals go from, last year they weren't approved until early in December, but let's say from November through October, so it gets into both years. So the goal was completed as planned. In other words, that I took a lot of steps that I thought helped to support the school improvement plan, the special ed improvement plan work, and the goals of making progress in responding to special education needs. So all the action steps are there. But the work on this goal is always ongoing. I think Derek pointed that out, that there aren't very many goals that are just a single year goal and it's one and done. That isn't the way that goals work. Most of the time when we have a goal, we take certain steps, but there are always things that may point us in a different direction, or say we need more time on this, or we need to continue in this vein. Not all of those things will translate to a specific goal for the following year, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't be addressed. So work is always ongoing in this area, and in particular, the work for the coming year, which I don't at this point intend to make a goal, but to say these are the things that we need to do for the coming year in this realm. One of them obviously is to provide mentoring and support for our new Student Services Director for Suzanne, who's over in the corner there, and that's ongoing. Expanded professional development for special education and regular education staff. I think I noted in the detail that we added a course. There was some suggestion that we had a lot of experts in our area in special education, and some parents met with me and suggested that we perhaps ought to do more with Landmark, because Landmark is well known for children with language-based learning issues in Carroll School. And so we did a lot of research into that, and actually Carroll School is no longer a school that is designated by DESC as a special needs school. It's a regular private school there, and so we can't support children going to that school with public funds, but it is a private school that people have a choice to go to. But we have added to our fall, Jamie's wonderful fall professional development catalog of workshops and courses, a course that's being provided here by Landmark staff, and that enrollment is ongoing and pretty close to actually tomorrow.
Well, we're doing two different pieces of partnership with Landmark. One is a sort of a 3-part series for our early release days, and that is full with a wait list of about 30 or 40 waiting to get into it. And it's already full at 30. We have a graduate course that's running starting in January, a full 3-credit graduate course where we still have a bit of time for the enrollment, but it's already maybe at 17 and it's capped at 30. And so any seats that we don't have available. Now, what I will say is that they are, just in fairness, incredibly expensive. So the graduate class plus the workshop was to the tune of $26,000. So we're thoughtful about ongoing partnership and how best to utilize that partnership, particularly at the price. But we are excited relative to the topics they're bringing. They were very collaborative with us and sort of talked about, well, what do you need and where can we help grow and develop your program. And so they sort of designed a graduate course for us, a focus on executive functioning and ensuring appropriate strategies for metacognitive strategies and skills as we build kids' executive functioning. So the faculty have been very receptive, and our first class with them would kick off on November I think 7th is the first release day. And that's when that would begin. So.
And I would say, too, that Suzanne has had some prior experience in Brookline in working with the Landmark Outreach Program, and so she has a perspective on that as well. And for me, being someone who doesn't like to recommend things that I don't know a lot about, Landmark also has a lot of online courses. Some of them are full courses, and some of them are PDP, 15 credit or 62.5 PDPs kinds of offerings. And so I've enrolled in one of those that actually starts tomorrow. It's a 6-week, it's a PDP course, and so I'll be trying that out, and that might be something that we can recommend. Those courses are the ideal things for people who are looking for PDPs for relicensure, and the fact that they're available online, and Landmark courses may be of great interest. So I'll let you know. It's a 6-week experience. And then we need to be paying attention to whatever are going to be some recommendations that come out of the independent evaluation. I think that there were a few things they wanted to touch back on this in September, and so we need to develop whatever the plan will be for how to release this information and who to release it to, and then responding to recommendations that come from that. Determining the FY’20 special education budget needs and what they are. We already know in terms of needs for money that we're going to have to put more dollars into the tuition account likely, but other needs we haven't identified yet, and some of them may come from the independent evaluation or from some other staff identified areas. And of course, analyzing the 2018 last spring's MCAS performance data, particularly for the high needs population, is something that we've committed to doing. Jamie did an excellent report last year, and we'd be looking to do that again. The second goal was working with John and the Long Range Planning Committee to facilitate the work of the building committee for this year. When we started last fall, we had a building committee all appointed. We have dollars for a feasibility study that the town voted at a town meeting, but we didn't have then, and didn't get later in the winter or in the fall, an invitation from MSBA. Nevertheless, the building committee wanted to be active, and we had some dollars that had been allocated for our master plan. And so we were able to have, with their guidance, some borings done that would give us more information about the portion of that plot of land that could support a building and where that might be and what's underneath the ground and what's in that big hill and all of that. So they did that in the fall, and then in the spring, they're still anxious to keep going, and so I invited the school building committee to work with us, particularly on reviewing the submission of the SOI and also the enrollment study that I mentioned before, and that will come up in Goal 5, I believe it is. So the note there is, looking forward, where are we? Well, we are waiting, and we hope to hear something by early November, and we hope that what we hear will be an invitation to work with MSBA on a feasibility study. The funds for that study are already available, voted 2 years ago at a town meeting, and that will be good news, and everybody will be busy then, because certainly as during the feasibility study, the work really heats up for the building committee and also for those of us who are supporting that effort. But I would call to your attention the note at the bottom, and I've said this a few times lately at the planning meeting and also at an all-town PTO meeting recently, but in the absence of an invitation, a response to our SOI, to work with the MSBA on a foster project, the school committee and the school department and town officials are going to need to get together and collaborate in discussing what other options can respond to this need. The need is there, it's not going away, it gets more serious every day. We keep the building running, there's a lot of manpower, womanpower, and dollars put into keeping that building as comfortable as we can make it, but it can't be forever. So there needs to be a serious discussion of another kind about what are we going to do about that foster project. Goal 3, we struggled with last year, and that's why the goals didn't get approved until we went along, just struggling to try to figure out what it is we were calling by different names. So this goal, and you'll note in the prior goals that I've tried to focus on what the goal was, and some goals are to explore, some goals are to create, some goals are to implement. This is an explore goal, and this was options for improving parent access to expectations for student work and assignments and projects. So finding the wording was hard, but what this related to was the perception by some folks that parents wanted to have what I call a common platform, and a platform would be something like X2, like Edmodo, like Schoology, like many other systems, some of them learning management systems that have a component where a parent can go on and not have to figure out that Johnny in the 5th grade, his teacher uses platform X, and in the middle school, 2 teachers of the parents' children use 2 different websites to convey homework and other kinds of expectations that might have. That was a perception that was out there. So I tried to get at what do parents really want, and what do students want and need, and what do teachers think about this whole thing? And is it important that we tell teachers that everybody has to use the same platform, and this will be it. So, lots and lots of steps here. I met with lots and lots of people. I heard about why department directors, why teachers in their departments sometimes use different platforms. And because if you're in the foreign language department, apparently you like to use video sometimes in the assignments and the things you're asking kids to do and look at, and that's better done on platform X than some other platform. We did a survey of all of the middle school teachers and all the high school teachers, and this was last spring, so maybe winter to spring last year. Might be slightly different this year, but at that point, virtually all the middle school teachers were using Google Classroom. Well, that's a common thing. So virtually all of them were doing that. Since some of the comments that we'd heard from parents on this topic go back a few years, it may have been before that was the case. There are still some middle school teachers who have websites that are unique to them, but they're all using Google Classroom. So we moved to the high school. We did a similar survey at the high school, and while there's a more of variety in terms of what is being used there, it was something like nearly 52% of high school teachers were using Google Classroom. Again, many of them had their own websites in a variety of places. Edmodo seemed to be kind of the second most popular thing that was in use. We talked about doing a survey for parents to try and get at what the question was, and at the same time, the school committee was doing the discovery experience with Stacker or Sterling Technologies. And we had already asked last year parents 2 or 3 other questions and different kinds of surveys. So said, well, maybe we can sort of mine the information we're going to get from Stacker, which was about what parent preferences were in terms of communication and technology. That maybe we can get some good information from that too. So we didn't do a separate parent survey or forum. But I did meet with a group of students, high school students, 20 to 25 of them. They were 9th and 11th graders. I was able to work that around with Dave Dewett's help around 10th grade MCAS, so that's why they were 9th and 11th grade students, and asked them what they thought about. It was confusing to them to have some of the teachers using Edmodo and somebody else using Schoology and somebody else using something else, and they didn't see a problem with that. And we talked a lot about what about your parents, what are their preferences. They thought that was kind of an odd question, actually, that I should care what they thought because they were in control. They thought it wasn't confusing to them. So we talked for about 45 minutes, and I finally at the end asked them to kind of sum up this whole discussion and what would they tell me to suggest or recommend in this area of common platform, common resource. And one young man spoke right up and he said, I think that what we should be doing is letting teachers use whatever they think is the most useful to them in teaching their subject. And we shouldn't care about what the students think or the parents think. So that came from, I think he was a 9th grader actually, on the topic. But in any event, we also said we'd explore different tools, because at one point I thought perhaps the parent issue is really more about could we not have to have a different password for all of these kinds of things? Could we explore what I call a one or single login? And so Joe and I explored ClassLink. That was something I saw at a conference a number of years ago. I last summer met with the sales manager for that product, and Joe and I participated in a webinar about what that product had to offer, and that product had a lot to offer. And some of the things it had to offer also connected with some of the things that Stacker had suggested in their report, in particular an analytics component. So that sounded good. However, we also explored the cost of that, and the cost was $2,000 for setting it up, and then it was $3.57 cents every year for 4,700 users. And the users included certainly all of the students and all of the staff. That's why it was 4,700 or so people. So that cost was a challenge. And Joe said, you know, there is a free product that is a one key to the door or one password system. It's called Clever, and we already have that. And some people in Hingham are already using it. Some of the teachers are using it, so we could expand that and take that step. So as we talked, it became clear that these two discussions about what is our reaction or response to the Sterling Technologies report going to be, and what is there that out of all this exploring that I did, what is it that we can do around this particular goal, that we're connecting together. And so the likely administrative recommendations, because we've got one more thing to explore, for both this goal and for the response to the Stacker report, which we will share first with the Community Outreach Subcommittee, is that we all agree that a website analytics tool would be a good thing. And for those of you who were at the Community Outreach last committee, Joe has now purchased that tool. It's called Site Improve, and it's going to give us the capability of doing some analytics around our website that we haven't been able to do. That was something that Stacker folks in the Sterling report suggested that would be a good place to start. And Joe and I to work on ways to foster increased use of Clever for those who are interested in that concept of one kind of a login, because it's already available. Some people in town are already using it, and it's free. And then lastly, the refreshing of the district website, and we committed at that meeting of community outreach that Jamie would try to get some quotes about that. That's actually in process. So that's where we are with respect to response to Stacker report and response to this goal. And we're proceeding in that direction. The other thing we looked at in terms of kind of a common platform was, what can we do with X2? We already own X2, and what can we do with X2? And there are two things that from X2 that one of them that we really should explore, and we just haven't had the manpower, people power to do it, but we really need to do it. One of them is development of the parent portal, and that is the tool that will allow people to be able online to make their own changes and not have to go through this paper process every year, filling out what's changed in your life, what's changed in your description, and you'd be able to do that online. And a number of communities around us already do that. Marshfield, I think, perhaps Situate, but a number of them. We've got to do that at some point, and we just got to find the man or woman power, or hire the man or woman power to update all of the contacts that are in our system. That's the key to doing that. So it's doable. We have what we need, but we need people power to make that happen. And in terms of X2 being a place where everybody could do their assignments, everybody could put their assignments on X2, that would require a unilateral action by the school committee to tell teachers that that's what they have to do. I think we have been not wanting to go in that direction. We, I think, wanted to be able to have people collaborate to find the things that they find useful for whatever their job is. But if the question is, could that happen? Could X2 be a place that everybody could put their homework? I think some teachers and some students would probably find that that wouldn't have the same capability as something like Modo, but it is possible to do, but it would take a unilateral action, and we're sort of trying to avoid those kinds of decisions for some very practical reasons. So that's it on that goal. Next goal was looking at the fact that during this school year, we anticipated originally a coordinated program review from DESC. That happens every 6 years, and so that we knew was going to happen this year. And so in the year before that, in the spring of the year before, which was last spring, we would be expected to do a self-assessment on certain of the standards in a number of categories. And so those categories were some special education criterion, they call them, some civil rights criterion, some ELE criterion, and then sort of after the fact, we got a list of things that we had to do in a set of criterion that are looking to be sure that we have continuity of education for kids in some particular classes, in particular foster children and children in military families. And so those were added on later, and Jamie submitted that information. So all of the information is submitted electronically, the self-assessment information, and that all happened late last spring and into the summer. And then we heard about a week ago that we will have a site visit. We anticipated that would happen. Our site visit is for the Thursday and Friday following the February vacation. We were given the name of the individual who will chair that visit, but we have yet to find out what the expectations of the actual visit are. This is now a new process. It's no longer called a program review. The new title is Tiered Focus Monitoring Process, TFM process. And so we've never been through one of those before, nor has anyone else, because this is the first year of tiered focus monitoring. And so we have yet to know how many people will be on this team, the ones that are coming on, the team that's coming on the Thursday and Friday after vacation. We don't know how many. We don't know what they'll actually be doing. Will they simply be looking at the evidence behind the things that we submitted to them electronically? Will they be going to every building? Will they be meeting with parents? I mean, all those things are things that have happened before in the coordinated program review process, but we don't know yet. So more to follow on that whole topic, and we think we're in good shape. But so the goal for last year was getting ready for this visit. The goal for this year is the visit, but we don't know yet exactly what that entails.
I think on both of those fronts, we sort of gave what we had, right? And so part of the process is we get feedback, right, on next steps. So there very well could be work that emerges from these reviews to sort of adjust. Like, for example, with the educational stability review, that was where we adopted the new policies relative to homeless, kids in foster care and kids who are military connected, and those were two things that they wanted to review and asked us to submit in July. And so we're slightly behind in terms of, but so was every other school committee in the Commonwealth, right? So there are some pieces that we know will likely have to submit sort of feedback on, of how we plan on disseminating those policies and how we plan on training the faculty and staff on those policies. So just to know that it likely will be another year of then implementing any sort of targeted feedback for us, right, relative to, okay, so we heard this, now we want you to see you do this. And so they generally is a multi-year process. But those are the kinds of the things that we're working toward relative to those reviews. Some context.
Okay, and the last goal was about the external enrollment projection process. We've talked about that a lot recently. We hired NESDEC. NESDEC is going to update the plan they gave us in August, and with the new enrollment information, that didn't take more than a few days, and we'll have that. The actual study, the whole study, is on the website. There are really only 1 or 2 pages of it that I think it's important for everyone to look at, and that's the page that actually has the projections, and also a lot of interest in the page that has information about the anticipation of enrollment that will come from the shipyard project, the Avalon project, and the project that I noticed over the weekend now not just has piles of dirt, but actually has some structural stuff going up that's over on Beale Street. So, so that will get updated, and it's on the website for anyone who wants to see it. There's not a lot more to say about that. I will say in something that's related, and Ed may mention more of this in his report, that Foster is only one part of a larger facilities master plan. And we have had now, with the completion of this report, just about all the pieces that we need to finalize that facility plan that needs to be put together. But we had a long-range planning meeting a week or so ago, and we want to do a little more exploration of a couple of our facilities to give more detail to the final plan. So the master plan finalization will happen this year, and you'll hear more about that from long-range planning as it goes along. But this is one piece of that. So we didn't do the external enrollment thing just for Foster. We did it for the master plan, but Foster is kind of moving ahead, hopefully faster than the entire master plan will, but that will get finished this year. So those are comments on the goals, so I'd be happy to answer any questions. Oh, one more slide though. So, you know, as you look forward to, the goals here are presented because they're part of the superintendent evaluation process. And so as I think about that process, I think about, so what goes into an evaluation? Well, one piece of an evaluation should be, you know, how a person does the job. All of us have job descriptions, and so those are things that we have to do. We all, as part of the educator evaluation process, me included, have to do annual goals. That's what these specifically are. But then there are all those things that occupy so much of our day, and today was a perfect example of coming to work. And we all had our list of tasks for the day, and what's the first thing that happens around 9 o'clock is that we have an event that nobody anticipated happening. And that took a lot of time. And much of a lot of time of that was trying to keep people, like parents and the press, aware of what's happening. So just throws everything else out of kilter for the day. So we have lots of those days in our life. So looking back on the past year, or in my case, this evaluation cycle from last November to now, I was thinking about all of the things that also got done, that either were more involved than we thought they might be, and therefore took more time, or that really were nobody's imagination a year ago. And so here are just some of them. The principal and student service director searches took more time and were spread out more for a whole bunch of reasons. Conflicts between trying to schedule site visits and MCAS testing, that kind of thing. And we do a thorough search for our administrators, and we think that it's a good process, but it's time consuming. There's no question it's time consuming. And so that was longer and more spread out than I think we did originally. But we've got two great people, and that's a great result. So these aren't necessarily negative things. It's just that they are things that you don't always think about when you're trying to also do the job description and complete the goals. Spring and summer hiring, you've heard me talk about that. So 75 to 80 new hires overall. So 30 of those were teacher and professional hirings. 35 of them were paraeducator hirings, and the rest, there was an officer at the door. And the rest were smatterings of bus or van drivers and tutors and other kinds of people. So again, all good news. We think we got good people. We think we have a good hiring process. And starting with the directors and the principals who screen for candidates, do the interviews. Many of those interviews may involve a grade level team or another team. Some of the interviews include a component that's a model lesson. And so So we spend a lot of time on those kinds of things. Just in terms of in this office, interviewing the candidates, meeting with them finally, making sure we've got all the paperwork, getting them onboarded, I call it, into the payroll system, getting out the letters of appointment and all of that is roughly 3 hours a person. So if you look at the 75 or 80 people times 3 hours a person just in this office, and that impacts mainly Pam and me and John and Audrey and Nancy, who's our payroll person. But it's a lot of time, and this was more this year, more people than we had before. The FY’19 budget process, the process for the year that we're in, it was a little bit longer last year. That we had more meetings, for not necessarily a bad thing, but we had more meetings, and we had a number of requests for background support or additional information or rationale for needs, and we provided that. We also had, in the midst of it, some interactions with our political friends who helped out with the underfunding of circuit breaker, and so there were a lot more meetings that we had that related to this process. Again, it doesn't mean that it's a problem, it just means that it took more time. So the process was productive, and we had a good result. And then the last slide. And then in the category of things that we really didn't anticipate when we even started the year until about November was the kindergarten age and entry concern at kindergarten, and that resulted in 3 open forums. It resulted in kindergarten teachers getting together to put together expectations and curriculum presentation, so that was a project that went on, even though it wasn't something we anticipated. So all in all, as you think about evaluating any educator, anyone, you're thinking more immediately about me, but for any educator, there's a job description under all of it, and sometimes that gets totally lost. There are the several hundred emails a day that most of us get, and then there are the goals that we're trying to get to, and then those other things like what happened today or what happens in some of these other things. So those are all the comments I guess I want to take on that. I suspect at the next school committee meeting that you will want to be sharing the paperwork for the evaluation process, which happens the first meeting in November. So we don't need to talk about that this evening, but we'll just keep that in mind.
Yes, so at the next meeting, I'll give up the instructions on how to fill that out, and how we'll put together the evaluation. I think we'll follow last year's process where everyone does an individual one, and then we sort of collate everything and put it into one overall evaluation for Dr. Gallo. Any questions on this in particular right now?
I do. So I was looking particularly at goal number 1, which was work with Liz Carolyn, Liz O'Neill, Jamie Legola, and the Special Education Subcommittee to support this Special Education Improvement Plan work and goals. I have to say it really has improved a lot, especially around the areas of professional development and communication. Like it's been huge. And I think it's really great that you enrolled in the online course at Landmark. I hope you enjoy it.
Well, we'll see how I do.
That sounds good. I guess my concern about this is, I looked back at the original program improvement plan that was presented to the community in January of 2017. And during that time, the school committee and the administration had set aside $25,000 to look at the special ed programs. Parents had asked for an overall, an outside consultant to come in and look at the programs, and what we all came to consensus was that we weren't going to do that. We're going to have a task force come together, and I think Dr. Little gave us a list of all the programs, and there's a timeline, and we're going to talk about whether we could do it internally, externally, and kind of, systematically go through all of that. I guess my concern with the plan is that, so we're a year and a half into it, and we don't even have one completely done. So we have the middle school program there. I know they're wrapping it up and they're going to be doing it, but we haven't. In the original timeline, we had probably looking at all of the programs by 2019, 2020, and most of them would be done before that. There were only 2 left for that final year, and now we haven't touched on the high school strategies and skills classes, the post-grad program, the elementary programs at all, intensive skills, or the preschool. So I guess I just want to know, is there a plan to kind of address these systematically? Now we're getting some momentum in the work we're doing around special education. So
Well,
is
I
there-
would say that with the new director that we have, I think we have to look at what we said we were going to do and what we've done, and then how are we going to accomplish the at least the sense or the intent of the other kinds of things. And that's sort of happening as we go along, because Suzanne is getting to know, she has some ideas already of things that she would like to see, and some of the things in the original plan might be things that can be accomplished in a different way. So I think part of the getting to know the system and getting to know the people is going to be, Suzanne has seen this. I didn't bring it. I don't think you sent it along today, but the report that Jamie did back almost 2 years ago now. Yeah, I think Suzanne has seen that, and as Suzanne is meeting with CPAC, for example, to talk about, how do we establish a communication system that may or may not be different, likely may be different from what we've done before, but this is the report. It's full of stuff, so I think it's a matter of sitting down and saying, okay, where do we go? We've got all this data now. Some of the data is getting to know people. Some of the data is impressions about programs that we have. Some of the data will certainly come from the middle school report. I think with respect to the high school, there was a self-study initiative last year on the high school too, so that's a little further than we thought that we might get, but it's a work in progress, but we don't want to lose this, because these were needs that were identified and
Right.
plans that we had, but we now have a new person in place, and we've got to take all of this and all of what Suzanne has seen and thinks at the moment and come up with where do we go next in terms of the things here that are undone and still need doing, or undone and maybe aren't as bad as we thought. I don't know. I don't want to predict what the outcome will be, but we've got good staff in that department, and I have confidence that we can move along.
So is there a plan to move forward systematically to address all these programs? Because
Well,
we've only looked at the middle school so
one
far.
of the things that Suzanne needs to do, and all the administrators that I directly supervise, including John and Jamie and Suzanne and all the principals and all of the directors and Joe Andrews, all of those people need to submit their own goals for this year. And I suspect that some of what you're wanting to see is going to come out in Suzanne's goals. I haven't seen her goals yet. They're due this month, and John's and Jamie's are due as well. So it's fair to ask us to put in print what it is we're going to do.
Did you have something to say?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I think if we go back in time, part of the work that we were trying to do was to build a collaborative group of multiple stakeholders, right, who are a part of special education. And I think given, and again, it's not to make an excuse, but given the complexity of that relationship, it took time for that team to gel and to begin to work together and come together. We made decisions, and those were carried out. So as of last fall, when the money was committed for the middle school evaluation, there was a little, as you recall, a bit of a misunderstanding relative to how we go about soliciting proposals from vendors, and so we actually just met with the consultants from BU last week, reviewed with them where they're at, and I think what you're about to get is an incredibly comprehensive document that outlines a significant number of points for consideration going forward, so much so that we actually paused to come back and talk about the process by which we share the results, so it doesn't become overwhelming to the school, not only our faculty but also to our community. We also directed them back to find out some more pieces of information. Like we had done a retreat with our K-12 literacy team to have that group build a common vision amongst themselves, and what is the role of specialized reading. And I think as the middle school, as the evaluators were talking through middle school and sort of where they were at relative to their thinking and their research, issues like, well, the middle school reading program came up. And I said, well, you really need to go back and talk to the reading specialists, because they really oversee specialized reading at the middle school. They also requested to meet with the guidance counselors, because in all their focus groups and from talking to teachers and observations, and the role that those people played at the middle school was significant. And so we allowed them an opportunity, which is why we're under a slight delay, to come back and get those missing pieces that we feel like will eventually give us a more well-rounded, comprehensive set of recommendations for going forward. Now, I also share the frustration with not getting more done, so I can't make an excuse for that, other than to say where we decided to begin as a team was in one of the most complex buildings that we have relative to student experience and teacher perception and administration. And so there was a lot there that they are unpacking for us. And we did talk in the spring as a team, as that task force, to sort of expand out and do a hybrid model for the high school. And we're meeting with Dr. Porsche when she comes in a couple weeks with the follow-up from the middle school to talk about next steps, which is what the team decided. So to your point about in January of 2017, right, the proposal of what we thought we would be doing over the next 4 years, the reality is different from what that proposal was. But we're also thoughtful with the change in leadership in the department to allow Dr. Vinnis, who is an expert in her own right in this domain, the opportunity to get accustomed to the culture, get to meet people, and sort of begin to sort of find her own way through that process with that task force of people. Does that make sense? So I hear you. We do need to update our task force on sort of what we've done so far, and sort of, because we have gotten a couple questions and we've just been thoughtful about next steps. I've also been a little bit tied up with the social and emotional work that's been going on, and I just was able to email my task force last week with sort of our next meeting, and just because we had to get the opening of school sort of underway. So I think we do have, so is there a plan to actualize what that initial proposal was in 2017? Probably not, but there is a plan to best utilize that group of people in a way that Dr. Vinnis and that team can feel comfortable about. That makes sense? And I think that's something that she's and I don't want to speak for you, I mean, you're sitting right there, but I mean, the extent to which she's building those relationships and beginning to understand as on top of the day-to-day demands of the job. And I think I think part of what Dot's last slide was trying to articulate was sort of the volume of work that we do in any given day. And so it's not always in those places where we feel like we want to be all the time. We were saying, Suzanne and I had dinner before the meeting tonight, and we were both sort of saying, sometimes you get so frustrated with the work that you have to do to get to the work that you want to get to do, right? I mean, that's part of our frustration too. And so it's not ideal. It's not sort of what we had envisioned back in 2017 as a way to move forward. But I think that the process that we were trying to employ with all good intention was to bring people together, to have it be a collaborative process that, given the history and the experiences of both our faculty and our parents who volunteered, took a little bit more time to build a sense of cohesion than we initially had into. I'm not making an excuse, it's what happened. And so we spent, and there was a confusion with the process by which we were going to seek vendors, and so is there a plan to evaluate the district's programs? Absolutely. Does it mirror what it was in 2017? No. And that's really because of what has transpired over the last year. But Suzanne, do you want to speak at all to your?
We obviously talked a lot about it.
Yeah.
In terms of
Suzanne.
the high schools.
Can you
You just gotta step to a mic, sorry. You do, yeah.
mainly for the people at home, Suzanne, on TV.
So in terms of formality, the next step is definitely the high school, which is what we talked about.
Right.
And I plan to bring the task force back together again when we knew when we were going to have a report back from BU about the middle school.
Okay, great. Do you have any sense of when that'll be?
Hopefully in November.
Okay.
They just have one little piece to tie up, and then they asked for just that month extension because we asked them to go back and do a couple of more things.
Yeah.
And so the plan is to have it in November, so we'll be able to get together and come up with a plan, because I think that's really where I would like to focus the planning energy right now, is on the middle school program.
Great, thank you.
Because I think there also will be some recommendations that may come out of that have implications for the budget that we want to make sure we get to you in time
That's
as those
right.
conversations
Yeah.
begin. So it
Yeah.
was initially supposed to be October. We asked for 2 additional pieces that we felt were part of the puzzle that really weren't addressed there as thoughtfully as they could be, if that makes sense. And so they're going to come back and do that. We actually just booked them on a date, and I think the middle school is facilitating those people getting together to meet with them to sort of have it be as efficient as possible. And then November now is the timeline for the report to come in. So we're in progress. It's just, it's fair, an update is needed.
Yeah.
And I think we sometimes forget that that gap in the summer, again, we've not stopped working. So we've been sort of working on it consistently since the end of the year. But given that most people people come back, it's sort of like, well, where are you? And to us, we just left. So that's fair. We will provide an update to the team so they know.
I also don't want to underestimate that there might be information that comes out of that report that can actually be applicable to other grade levels and other programming.
Right.
So there may be some more general best practice programming ideas that we may actually be able to apply to other grade levels. So I don't want to assume that we're not going to be able to do that, because I think we might be able to.
Yeah, I think that was the goal of the task force at the time, too.
Oh,
was
okay,
hoping
great.
that
Yeah.
things from the middle school would have also applied at the high school, too.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So I would hope that that's something that we could do.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No,
Okay.
not for me.
Thank you, Carrie. Does anybody else have other questions or comments on the evaluation at this point? All right. So at the next meeting, we'll give instructions on our evaluation. All right, thank you, Dr. Gallo. Item 6.7, to receive notification of the Hingham High School overnight field trip to England, France, and Belgium on April 10th through April 20th. It's in your package. It's a new trip for the high school. Does anyone have any questions?
I
Well, I
had a
suppose.
question. The price of it made me look at it a little closer.
The French trip.
The
France.
England, France, and
France, and Belgium.
Yeah.
Trip, yes.
The World War II trip, the cost
The World War II.
struck
The
me
cost.
as well.
And so I posed this to my fellow school committee members, that can we ask the question of offering these programs and with equity in mind? And our mission statement, the mission of the Hingham Public Schools, is to provide challenging and comprehensive educational programs in a safe and supportive environment, enabling all students to develop the knowledge and skills necessary for success as local and global citizens. So I think it's wonderful we make this programming available to interested students, but should we be looking at the criteria of the types of programs we're offering, and do we take this into consideration of what we offer, considering inclusiveness and equity? And can we come up with some way of, like, what are we even offering this year? And then we're throwing this trip in April. There's already Galapagos, and I think there's a couple other trips going on, but this is the highest priced trip that I can remember in a while. And I'm like getting overloaded with some of this, and maybe it's just my imagination, but and I think it's wonderful that the teachers volunteer to go on these trips, and I think it's great, but I just made me really take a second look at it and want a little more information of balancing what's out there. And
So certainly there isn't anybody who worries about equity more than I do. You know that. I would say I wouldn't want anyone listening or anyone here tonight to think that we aren't providing an excellent program for everyone.
Yes,
That's our main
I
mission.
agree
So
with
I
that,
think
yeah.
of these field trips as extra things. That being said, there's a reduced number of students that could be take part because of cost. In fact, if we could make, if this were a free trip, we couldn't handle the number of youngsters who want to go. So there's always that balance between the things that you provide that are only accessible to students with means, even though there may be a few scholarships that could be available for some trips, and sometimes there are, depending upon the trip and who the sponsor is and what the audience is and that kind of thing. I have mixed feelings about it, but short of saying that we won't sponsor a trip over a certain dollar value, or we will only allow, and I shouldn't say sponsor because we're not really the sponsors, we're the enablers or people that allow it. Or do we say that unless more students can go, then nobody can go? I struggle with that. I very much care about equity, but we know that not everybody can afford everything, and we couldn't manage it if they could. So I'm somewhat consoled by looking at things like the Washington trip, for example, that we've had the last couple of years, an effort to be able to provide for more kids who couldn't fund that, because that's something that we think every child should participate in. Some of these other things are the nice to haves, and we know that not everybody can participate. I don't know where we find that balance, and whether we want to be, rigid about setting criteria that have to do with cost or mode of transportation, or sometimes we've tried to provide things that are more accessible through other means. There's so much that you can do online nowadays in terms of kids having the experience of a trip, but the experience of a trip is really only the experience of what you do when you go, and you can learn the things that you're going to learn on that trip in other ways, and we certainly teach the World War II curriculum in our schools, so we can provide that knowledge, but nothing can replace a trip. And so are we advantaging some kids and disadvantaging others, or are we giving all kids a strong core and providing for kids whose parents want more and are able to provide it? I don't know where that line is. And I don't think it's unique to a community like ours, where we have the larger proportion of parents who are able to provide, not for everything that may be offered, but for some of these things, and where a very small percentage of parents aren't able to provide for a trip to Boston, for example.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, it's a good question. I don't know what.
I mean, part of it could be, too, that the trip itself is to 3 countries with 3 modes of transportation over 10 days. So I think that in and of itself may add to the cost of the additional transportation prices. But, I mean, I think we're willing, Dot and I are both willing to go back and bring you back some recommendations for ways to your point about sort of understanding the travel in general and sort of the trips that are going on, if that's what you'd like us to do. But I'm thoughtful of not letting this go through because we're concerned about a bigger picture that we haven't really had a opportunity to study more comprehensively. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think looking long run, I think it would be good for us to consider.
Look at that more carefully.
Do we look at finding a fund and the appropriate way of offering that, confidential, and having people evaluate who actually gets the funds, but make opportunities available to kids that can't go, because I mean, that price,
It's expensive.
that's our family vacation budget for a year. Yeah, that's a big ticket. So, and I realize that there are a lot of people that can do it, but I would say there's more that can't. And will it even go? I mean, will they even get enough kids?
Well, I was just going to say that sometimes
go on
the
the
market
trip.
decides,
Right.
and what breaks the bank, and maybe
Right.
this would be one of those.
Right, and
I also have to make the comment, I'm sorry,
no, that's okay.
what is the magical number? For one family, $2,000 might be
Right.
pricey.
Yeah.
And then, and this is peanuts for some families. So I think it's really hard to define what really is the right number, magical number.
So that's what I was thinking to Dr. Jamie's point, that I think it's definitely a more philosophical discussion.
Yeah.
Not this particular one, because while it's the most expensive, I feel like I've seen close to it. So exactly, I don't want to set a number, being like,
Yeah.
oh, that's, you crossed the line now.
Yeah.
But I do know at the high school several years ago, a group of people had started talking about starting some sort of scholarship, travel scholarship fund for students, and making these trips sort of need blind. So you could sign up for the trip without getting into whether or not you could afford it, and then figure out the money later. You know, some people
Yeah.
can afford it, some people can't. Maybe some people will give back, right? Those who can afford it will say, oh, I'd kick in an extra $500 to help support someone else coming and do, and there, I know there definitely is a component of fundraising too when they do these trips. So the students are expected, as far as I think it's for every trip, they're expected to do some level of fundraising. So this is not the actual check that, this is the cost per person, but it's not necessarily the check that will be written. Like, the students are expected to do fundraising to offset that cost.
A lot of fundraising.
It is a lot of fundraising.
Okay, I don't remember that.
And
from the
maybe
past, so.
that's voluntary, the fundraising piece, but I'm just remembering some other trips where kids, like the whole group of kids was selling candies and doing all these things
Yeah.
to, and then all the funds raised were, they weren't prorated per student, like if you all pulled your money together and then it reduced the trip, the cost for everybody. So there's some things that we could think about from a global perspective.
So that was, it flagged it for me, that,
Right. But I think
So,
it's,
I mean, you know, we go ahead, see who wants to sign up for it, but, and, I mean, Chrissy O'Connor is a great teacher to go on the trip, so I'm sure they'll learn a lot.
So she, I realized that the price may go up, given if they don't have 20 students. So, like Kay asked, so there is no, they don't have a set number of, if it's less than 10, they'll cancel.
Yeah, well,
I think
those,
things we-
They've canceled trips in the past.
yeah, they
Right.
don't get enough
Yeah.
interest, so.
yes.
Better
So
than that.
let's see if we can get some more information. Is there any way that the trip could be less, and still do the critical things that need to be done? What does she think the enrollment is at the moment in terms of whether or not the trip is going to go or not?
Yeah, I guess I'm not so concerned about this particular trip, but I looked at it and it made me really think about the overall program
Right.
and the macro approach, and are we doing something for students that, you know, there might be a really top student in social studies class that would get even more out of this if they were able to go, but their family's not in a position to go. And do we want to be able to help those kinds of students? Those are the kind of questions going through my head.
And when
more
she
than-
says we need 20 students for the price to stay the same, I'm suggesting that if they don't get 20, then the price would go higher. So that doesn't seem fair either, that someone signs up thinking they're
Yeah.
going to pay 5,000. And so I think that there's a place where I really would say if we didn't get the 20, then we can't run it, because it's not fair for people to sign up for something and find out that it's even more than they anticipated it would be. That's one thing that we could do. Now, normally, we get a itinerary and so on for these trips. I think the reason we get them so early is that this is catch-22. They want to know that the trip is possible, and then they'll work on the fundraising activities, whatever that component is, and getting the kids prepared and so on. Because if they come later when all those things are worked out, then it's kind of late in the game to say yes or no.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
So, I mean, I think the consensus is that we're supportive of this particular trip, and then to Dr. Jamie's point, maybe
Bigger conversation.
bigger
about
conversation around
affordability.
this type of extracurricular.
right, so let's do that.
All right.
Because fundraising came up on this one, I would like to raise a point, and actually, I got a note from Liza today, but that wasn't the first thing that came up. About 2 weeks ago, one of the principals indicated to me that several of his teachers were planning to do one of these, I call it GoFundMe, but it was a different plan, but the same idea, that you put out there that you have a need, and then people wire in, maybe your grandmother in, Ohio, and your cousins in San Francisco or whatever, and they send money and you can go off on a trip. My nephew in Florida just had one of these kinds of trips that I contributed to. But the example that was given for what these teachers were intending to do, and I apologize for not remembering the name of the program, but it was like a GoFundMe account, was they gave samples of what schools in other districts did, and some of them were not even, in fact, I don't think any of the examples was actually in Massachusetts. It was for things for their classroom, for basic school supplies for classrooms, and things that in Hingham teachers have pretty much provided for them, either because we have a basic budget that covers the real necessities of learning, and we have a grant process often with both the PTA and through the foundation that provides some of those other things that teachers might want to explore. So he was a little uneasy, sort of gave away which school it was, didn't I? But anyway, it doesn't really matter. And he wanted my opinion on this. And I said, I'm really uneasy about this for a lot of reasons. Some of the reasons that the principal is concerned about, wow, what does this say to the world that poor teachers in Hingham have to go out and, online ask for money for conducting basic education? What does that say? Is that a message we really want to send? And then some very practical reasons that we have language in our policy handbook about fundraising, and using the name of the school to do fundraising. But those policies were written, even though we've updated them some over the years, way before this whole kind of GoFundMe craze, if you will, has started. So we don't have any policy particularly about that kind of fundraising. And so I said to him that I'm uneasy to move forward with anybody doing that fundraising for things here until we at least have a policy discussion about whether or not we want to have policy particularly about that. So we agreed that he would discourage that initiative by his classroom teachers. And then Liza brought up one that's actually going on now with one of our athletic teams, and none of us really knew about it, and have the same feelings about that kind of fundraising, because it suggests that we're not providing adequately, and we never provide enough money for what everybody wants to have, but we give a lot of attention to athletics and lots of other activities. And so my want is to at our next week's administrative council meeting, make sure that everybody knows that we shouldn't go forward with modes of fundraising that haven't at least been discussed at a policy level. And so you will be hearing about that if you're in the policy subcommittee. But it's a whole new thing that never happened before, and now it's out there.
I think you're speaking of Donors Choose. Is that the one that?
I can't hear you.
Are you speaking about Donors Choose? Do you want to go to?
I'm not sure. Could be that one.
There are no Hingham teachers on it.
Okay.
I'm just talking to them.
All right.
But that's a very popular one, and it's supposed to be for
Mhm.
high-need schools.
And, these teachers are well-meaning. They see that as, I can get,
I think one of the things to keep in mind with that too is you wanted to make sure that you're not violating, the state law by utilizing public venue to do fundraising.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think you are allowed to do for charitable work, but not for supplies and stuff like that. I don't know. You just gotta double check.
Right, and that's why we need to explore it.
On the athletic teams, we need to be careful of Title IX and,
making
Is the
sure.
athletic team doing as a booster, are they doing as a school?
It's in the
It's, well, it's,
careful.
it's
Should be
in
careful
addition
discussion
to
on
Yes.
agenda items.
booster
So let's-
fees. Yeah, we can,
Yes, so let's,
So there
we'll
are
take that
ethics
up in
kinds of things
policy.
that could be
right, yeah.
related to it, so.
we should look
So
at it
let's
from a
take it up in policy.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
Kay's once quiet year on
Yeah.
policy. All right, so we'll take that up in policy and then circle back on that. Thank you. All right, then we have another field trip, the annual Quebec City trip with the middle school French students. And that's just received notification of that, so any questions, comments on that? No, okay. So, item 6.9 and 6.11 are numerous appointments and salary changes, so I'm not gonna go through all of them because individually, because there's a lot of folks. But for item 6.10, and the names are in your packets, but for item 6.10, we'll receive the notification of the retirement of Ann Thompson, South School Secretary. So thank you to Ann for her many years of service. That will be effective at the new year. And then paraeducator Melissa Gaffney at Hingham High School is resigning. So thank you to Melissa as well for all of her hard work at the high school over the years. All
And it
right.
should be the last batch of lane changes
Lane changes, okay.
that came along, because that date has passed.
Okay, great, thank you. Item number 7, any 48-hour items? No?
No.
All right, great. All right, so item number 8, subcommittee and project reports. Ed, do you want to start with the warrants report? Which is in your packet, everybody, at the very end. It's item number 8.
Yeah, in your package, you have a blank, a form.
Well, not blank.
Well,
There's
comments
no-
are blank.
Comments.
Well, there would be many of these warrants. That was really intended if there was some particular item in a warrant that people had been wondering about, when is it going to get paid, that kind of thing. But in a typical warrant, you look at it visually, you try to note certain things, but many of them would not be deserving of a comment. They're routine business. So the
What I've
comment
been
is
doing
just.
is going in on Friday afternoons with Aisha, and have done 3 warrants, which are in your system. Under comments, I just, off the top of my hat, would remind you that these bills are utility bills, electric, gas, and oil, vehicle fuels, school supplies and the vendors, outpatient placement tuitions, CEU and reimbursements, outside repair, outside tradesmen, lease of the METCO bus, and normal operating expenses.
Great.
And if people would like something specific, just let me know.
Okay.
Because these are pretty much, one of these is pretty much generated every week. Yeah.
Every week we have warrant.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Carlos, do you want to do long-range planning?
Sure. Long-range planning committee met twice since our last meeting. We met on the 20th of September. We discussed the CPC application for the PRS playground. And with that, I want to commend Dr. Schreier and Libby for doing great work, and specifically Libby. If you want to speak a little bit, Libby, about the CPC application. And by the way, I wanted to also extend a thank you to Mr. Bob Hurley, as he looked at our capital plan for the next 5 years, and he realized that we had this playground that needs to meet compliance. And he suggests that perhaps we should consider applying for the CPC, and that's exactly what we're doing right now. Thank you. Go ahead, Libby, if you wanted to give a quick report on that.
Okay, so the school department, the school committee is committed to making upgrades to the PRS playground in order to bring it into compliance with the rules and regulations of the Architectural Access Board. And it's a wonderful opportunity to make the playground more accessible to children with disabilities and to make it more inviting to families throughout the community to come during during off-school hours as well. So we have, it's a no-choice project, though, in the sense that the board can administer some hefty penalties. They could shut down the playground altogether. They could impose fines of up to $1,000 a day. And so we've done some research into what the project entails and how much it would cost. And it does fall under the purview of the Community Preservation Act. So we're hoping to take advantage of that fact that this is a rare opportunity for the CPC to be able to alleviate some of the stress on the budget, on the capital outlay budget of the school department. And it's to the tune of about $88,000. And what that will bring is access, walkways to all of the different structures so that wheelchairs can get there and other ambulatory mechanisms. We would change some of the structures to make them more accessible, add a step, lower a bar, add grab bars. We would add a new structure altogether. And we have gotten the recommendations from the Recreation Commission, SNAP, and I'm going to get one from CPAC as well. So we're waiting on proposals now from companies. So there's more specific information that needs to go into the proposal, and it's due on October 12th.
Great job. I think, as you can tell, there's a lot of work, and Libby is doing a fabulous job in writing the grant. So, thank you, Libby, for that, and Dr. Schreier. We also had the Green Action Committee come and present to us once again. If you all remember, back in February, they came and did a presentation before us. We didn't take any action. They didn't ask for any action at the time, but they seem to be ready to move to the next phase, which is to seek the support of the school committee. So we met with them. We asked additional questions. After several questions that Dr. Schreier asked them, and along with John, we intend to present to the full school committee at the next meeting, our recommendation, and just be prepared to vote. If you'd like, I can forward to you the email that Liza sent back in February to everyone, so you can read again about the initiatives, but just be prepared to vote on this on the 15th. Additionally, we met on the 20th with 3 consultants that we interviewed to do the study at the high school clerestory. Did I say right? Clerestory windows. Can we reveal the name of the person we hired?
Sure.
Actually, John, why don't you go
Can I
ahead?
ask a question just for the minutes? I'm sorry. So on 9/20, you had the CPC discussion. Is that also when the Green Action Committee came?
Yes.
That is correct.
Okay, and then as well, the
we
high school,
reviewed
that
3
C word that we can pronounce, the Bajan.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Clear
Story
story.
windows.
Clear story.
Sure.
We actually had 2 meetings a week apart.
Clear story.
We did. I'm going
4
to
days
the next
apart.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
2
that's
meetings,
that
4 days
meeting.
A lot of vowels, that's all I'm saying.
John, so you want to go ahead and review the name of the person?
Yeah, so we did the, it was a marathon meeting, so we went from 6 o'clock to about
I'm just making
9:30.
sure. Yeah.
Okay. But
Got a lot done.
we interviewed 3 design candidates. We had 5 designers submit papers. We interviewed Habib, Wesling, and CBI. And after the interview, we did an evaluation and stuff. And right now, Habib came out the highest score. So I'm negotiating the contract price for them now, and they're ready to hit the ground running. So.
Great, thank you. So then we met on the 25th. The 25th meeting was primarily to discuss the master plan. So we went over the master plan, overall. So now with the enrollment, being done, We are ready to go on that. There is $25,000 left from the master plan that was utilized for the enrollment study that we, as you heard earlier, Dr. Gallo mentioned that there's a couple of projects that we need to do a little more evaluations. So that is the high school and South School. We intend to evaluate the systems and the findings will be reported on the master as part of the master plan. So we are utilizing leftover money. So you know, John doesn't have to go anywhere for that money. Anything
Right,
to
it's
that?
capital, there's $25,000 in capital to cover the expenses.
And I think I covered that. I think we're good.
Okay.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you. Kate, do you want to do policy and community outreach, if you have anything?
So, next policy meeting is November 2nd, although I feel like I need to move that up. My list is getting longer of items that we need to discuss. That will be November 2nd at 9 a.m. And then community outreach, so we haven't met.
We met
It's
the
just
day
so
we
much.
met with Joe.
We met, that was community outreach.
Yeah, I thought that's what you were talking
No,
about.
I'm talking about
next.
policy. But community outreach will meet on October 12th. I'll send an agenda to you tomorrow, so we can get that posted, and we'll discuss further what we discussed in our last meeting about Stacker and the results that we had from that, and the next steps that we want to take with the administration. And if you have any topics that you want to discuss, we will work on the website, I think. There's a lot of information going up about the superintendent search. We kind of need to clean that up, so I think it's easier to read and find the information. But if you, Michelle, also have topics for us to discuss, let me know.
Okay.
And I misspoke the last time, so that's October 12th at 11. And then tomorrow, I just want to mention there is a forum for the superintendent search that I will be there at Foster. I believe it starts at 8:30 for parents to come and drop in and give feedback. Okay. So,
I did have a question that came up about that from an individual about whether or not school committee members would be part of the forums. And the concern was about whether people would be able to speak freely if school committee were
And
present. So,
and if you remember, what the suggestion was of Dr. Carolyn?
Carolyn, yeah.
Was that we would go there in the beginning, help set up, but we would be part of the audience.
We're not attending any of the staff ones.
okay.
Yes, just the public.
Just the public and the student ones, and then in the public ones, we just sit there and we answer a clarifying question, but we're not participating, and we're actually letting the people speak directly to the NESDEC staff and putting all of their ideas up. And we even refrained from commenting on last week at the middle school. Some people brought stuff up and we're like, we won't go into it. You can ask us later, but, so.
And then there are forums here tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, I was gonna
so-
go through the list
Okay.
again.
yes, I just noticed I'm there tomorrow,
Yeah.
so
Yes.
to help set up and
Yeah.
want to make a small announcement.
If you want me to do it.
Thank you. All right, so we'll segue to you
Okay.
for salary negotiations.
So, yeah, so for the focus groups, we still have some remaining. So tomorrow morning at Foster School, 8:30 to 10:30. Anyone from the community is welcome. You do not have to be in the Foster family. Anyone's welcome. And then Tuesday evening, here in this room, we are starting with CPAC families first, and then it's open to the general public from 7:30 to about 9. And then we're also having, by invitation, focus groups for town hall staff on Tuesday afternoon, and for central office staff Thursday lunchtime. and Thursday afternoon for all the Hingham Public School staff. And the staff ones, not the school committee members, you might see us just there helping set up, but we will leave, we will not be part of any of the discussion for those. And we did have focus groups last week. On Thursday, we were at the middle school and we had about 15 to 20 people come, and then in the afternoon we had some focus groups for staff. And I will reiterate, these are drop-in sessions, so anyone can come at any time during that time period, and the comments are written on a piece of paper and posted on the wall, so you can come in and see what people have said before, and then you can add to that or begin the conversation again, so you don't have to stay for the whole time. You're welcome to, but you don't have to. We had a very tiny crowd on Saturday morning, but we made it available to people, and the online survey is open. It closes Monday night, October 8th, and so please, we have heard of people wanting to fill that out if they weren't able to attend focus group, or if you would like to add more information, and the link is found on the superintendent search on the page of the Hingham Public Schools website. And NASDAQ will compile that information as part of the candidate profile. So that goes straight to them. And just as other updates, we are still accepting applications for the 2 at-large positions on the screening committee. Those applications are due by this Friday, October 5th. Right now, there are 17 people who have applied. I have not been looking at the applications. I will, and then we're waiting for just a handful more people of the people we've asked to appoint to give us the names. And so this weekend, I will send the committee the at-large applications so you can start reading through them. The remaining appointments to the screening committee are due Tuesday, October 9th. So right after I get them, I will compile those 13 people to send to everyone. We are meeting on Thursday, October 11th, 7:00 p.m. as a salary negotiation subcommittee with the full school committee to pick the 2 at-large members. So I will send out that agenda and instructions when of how we'll lead the discussion when I send you all the names. And then we have a school committee meeting October 15th, and so then we will be able to announce to the community who's on the screening committee. And then please remember October 16th, NASDAQ is going to send us the draft candidate profile. So they're turning this information around pretty quickly. And then we are meeting October 18th with NASDAQ to discuss the candidate profile. So you can all, you're gonna have to read that and think about if it says what you wanna say, and then we will together come to consensus on that final candidate profile. So that's a pretty important discussion. And the job posting is open. NASDAQ reported there have been lots of clicks on their links, but that closes October 29th. So there's still lots of time for that. So that's about it.
All right. Thank you. I will do special ed subcommittee. We met on September 12th. It was a good meeting. It was relatively brief, from 6 to 7 prior to the CPAC meeting. We discussed some enrollment data, and then we had a discussion about the sort of what form the work plan, the special education collaborative work plan might take under Dr. Vinnis's leadership. And then I stayed for the CPAC meeting. The CPAC meeting was a sort of introduction of Dr. Vinnis. She gave a brief presentation to just introduce herself to the CPAC members that were there. It was a good crowd. There was 20-ish people, I think, in the room. Yeah, so it was a nice crowd of people. There was a great discussions back and forth. Dr. Vinnis shared her sort of vision and plans for what she thinks, and just getting to know the district. And there was some great discussion around the work plan and whatnot. So Dr. Vinnis and Tim Dempsey, the CPAC chair, are going to discuss what form that will take going forward. The next CPAC meeting is October, I'm so sorry, I'm going to forget the date. It's Wednesday, October 10th. Is that the 10th? Wednesday, October 10th, it's the rights and responsibilities presentation. And then I'm going to schedule a special ed subcommittee meeting after that, so sometime later.
Days after.
Days, yeah, days after that, yeah. And we'll have nothing on that. Does anybody else have any liaison reports? So I did CPAC.
I met with half, or
Okay.
I went to their
The
meeting, our
okay.
first meeting.
Yep.
And they are, have great plans to raise a lot of money, to put towards the Code Red. And phase year 2 is off and running, and it was a huge group of really motivated people. It was nice to see. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. How about SNAP?
Nothing new.
Okay. Anyone else? Dr. Ed, do you have?
And
high
school council
school.
is this Wednesday.
Yes.
And Michelle agreed to be my plan B, so she's covering for me. Thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome. I'm happy to do it.
Could I ask you
Yeah.
a question on the topic of school councils?
Yes.
Dr. Jamie, in your response to Carrie's question to Derek for the goals and improvement plan at the middle school, what's my takeaway for the goal improvement plan that will be on the agenda for the next council meeting that I'm going to attend at PRS? Because having done these for years, I know they'll be working on that from the get-go. Did I understand you to say that there's a pullback on these?
I think that there may be differences of opinion about what the scope of the plan is. Some, and maybe some of the ones that are already in process, have included not just the goals, but action steps with them.
Right.
And the action steps actually address a number of the areas that Carrie read from the law. So Derek gave just the goals, but the action step for a particular goal might involve something about professional development. It might involve how we would make the goal work for everybody. It might include a communication piece to it. So we need to clarify and make available to the other folks the format that we expect. I don't know, any plan that we ever had to eliminate the action steps, but
So the
They
takeaway is
weren't there,
rather
so.
than continue discussion with the difference of opinion, we would go back and ensure that all future school improvement plans that are presented meet the regulatory guidelines and expectations of what should be contained. All I was saying earlier was that when they give the presentation, what you got tonight was, again, just a summary of the goals from last year and the goals from this year, not necessarily the complete school improvement plan of Hingham Middle School. And so there was this conversation about approvals and whether, so we're going to table any further discussion until the next meeting, and hopefully all future plans will meet the committee's expectations.
Many years ago, probably 10 years ago, we had a series of meetings of councils of councils. So we met as a group of all 6 of the school councils and their members, and came up with common guidelines for what the school council improvement plan would be, not necessarily the entire school plan, but the school council improvement plan. And we clarified, for example, in the first couple of years of school council improvement plans, people tended to be wanting to always speak to communications things. For example, enrichment activities was another thing that was common in them, and we said, you know, we really need to get back to the heart of them, and that's so each one of the plans should include academic support goals as well as whatever other kinds of priorities an individual school might have. So we came up with some common guidelines that we followed. But there's a difference between the entire plan, as Jamie says, which includes action steps and who's going to do what and so on, and the goals themselves.
Yeah, so I was just looking at the agenda for tonight, and it said to receive the Hingham Middle School Improvement Plan for 2018-2019. So I thought that's what they were doing. And then there's the Department of Education requires school councils to address 9 areas in their school improvement plans, and they lay it out exactly what it is. So that's what some of those were missing from the report tonight. So that's what I was asking about.
All right.
Were they missing from what Derek just told us, or were they missing from his?
And that's what I don't know.
Report.
So
Okay.
it's rather than further conversation about a topic, but I
Okay.
want to make sure I have the correct information.
I don't want to cast
before you
blame,
are.
or there may not be any blame.
Was there a report?
Is what?
Was there a report separate from what we got
No,
in the
there
packet?
was not.
Okay.
What you saw tonight was what you got.
Okay.
So again, I want to make sure that we come back at you next time
Mhm.
with school improvement plans that meet your expectations.
That'd be
And I
great.
think that if we just stop the conversation there, it'd be helpful.
So with that, I would take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.